come out in the order on the agenda. It will start with me announcing the agenda item number. The planning officer will then go through the legal report and presentation. We will then call on public speakers and then members and officers of application. We will then go through any technical questions before the committee debate and then vote on the application. Can I start today with apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Mike Best, and we've had Councillor Mike Stanton is substituting, and apologies from Councillor Jenny Kenton, and Councillor Sue Osborne is on leave.
Okay, happy to note the apologies?
Good.
Okay, so the minutes have been previously circulated. Are you happy with the minutes?
No, sorry, Chair, they haven't noted them for you. They're not ready.
So then we'll bring them to the next meeting for signing off.
Yeah.
Any declarations of interest on any of the items that are on the agenda? Please note that you can raise declarations if you find anything that we're going through. Councillor C.
Chairman, we have an objection from Grimston Parish Council to this meeting. I sit on Grimston Parish Council and I will address the application before them.
Any other declarations, Councillor Wales?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I sat on the regulation committee, which dealt with the Octagon Theatre's final throws. And I don't know whether having the same or a similar application to begin is a declaration of interest, but it should perhaps be noted.
Okay, just going to hand you over to our legal officer first, just to have a quick comment on the Octagon application.
Thank you, Chair. This type of issue came up at the chairman's briefing yesterday. I've looked into it. I've spoken with the head of legal and fellow deputy monitoring officer. The last application that came before a committee for the Octagon was in 2023.
Yeah.
And we don't consider that a dispensation is required. And so I think you are perfectly okay for the committee to note your declaration and for you to sit and speak and vote on the item certainly.
Thank you.
Very much for that. So following on from that, I would declare the same interest in Councillor Wales, because I was also a member of the last application, the case of the last to the aspect. Got the name of the committee to regulation.
Yeah.
Any other declarations, Councillor Patrick?
Only an interest really that I sat on SSDC, so that's on District Council, and voted for the Octagon redevelopment on the full council. That's the extent of my interest in this application.
That's all.
Councillor Kelly?
I have to say the same.
I'm happy to take it as read that any former SSDT members would have sat on that committee to say that we want that to be noted. Okay, thank you very much. Before we move on to public question, are there any public speakers who wish to speak public question time? No. So we will move forward. Before we move on to the first application, just going to reorder slightly and hand over to Troy, just so we can have a quick overview of the planning appeals. Because I'm aware that there are several this time, and I know that by the time we get to the end of the meeting, we're all quite keen to leave, so don't always hear the detail there. But it'd be good to bring that forward as existing Troy.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I'm just going to take you on a whistle-stop tour of the appeals that have been received in the intervening time. So we've had a couple of appeals which have gone through in relation to Class Q conversions of agricultural buildings into dwellings. Those have for the most part been dismissed, but we have had one particular one where it has been allowed with essentially kind of recognition that that they were able to impose a condition relevant to allowing it to go ahead, and that noise and impact on living conditions of host building was regarded as being appropriate. And second, where there was submission of amended drawings, which were designed to reduce the size of elements being proposed and address the reasons for refusal. So those were both allowed on appeal. We have also been looking at conversion of 2 dwellings into a single dwelling house at the Higher Farm cottages, and that was allowed based on an assessment by the inspector of a limit to the impact on heritage asset nearby, and in fact there was a significant fallback position. So essentially the inspector regarded it as being appropriate on tilted balance, and bearing in mind that they could produce a similar scheme without requiring this consent to go through. So it's not regarded as being a significant deviation. They did have took a position in relation to the distance and surrounding views that the proposal was sufficiently obscured. One of the more interesting ones was Holly Tree Farm. So this was based actually on an outline consent where a number of conditions have been imposed in relation to it. And although they were appealing quite a large number of the conditions, there were 3 which were removed as part of this appeal. One related to cell filled, which was actually imposed in error, and there was a visibility splay condition. That was agreed to be removed by the inspector because the works had been carried out and therefore was no longer relevant. The last was in relation to restrictions or removal of permitted development in regards to specific extensions and outbuildings in relation to property, and the inspector struck that down and allowed costs in relation to the PD restriction and in relation to the condition that had been imposed for self-built in error. So essentially the basis for removing the PD rights was not regarded as being sufficient in terms of its impact on visual amenity.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Professor Webb?
Yeah, just for my information, really, would it be possible to mark the appeals when they come on the committee papers, whether they've been a committee decision or an officer decision? Just for because we're always given dire warnings about what happens if it goes to the inspector, and it's only a matter of fairness that we see which are ours and which are others. So it's not a criticism, it's just for, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. We are all one team, but I do agree with you, and it was a comment that I raised at pre-agenda. Firstly, to see if we can permanently move this forward in the agenda so that it's always at the beginning. And secondly, so that we can have that bit of information as well. So, Councillor Sid.
I'll totally agree with Councillor Webb, but I would also like to know how many of the actual decisions were taken during the planning surge when we were less engaged with planning department officers.
Okay, I'll ask Troy if he can find that out for us and pop that in an email to members so that we can have that information. Okay, thank you very much. So we move on to agenda item 5, which is the tree preservation order in White Lappington, and I believe that Ben is online. Ben, would you like to pop your camera and microphone on for me?
Hi there, good afternoon. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah, we can all hear you, Ben. I don't know if you can hear us. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, I've got that. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Apologies for not being there with you today. I think I thought it was best for everyone given my condition. Brilliant. So I've got a TPO to put to the committee. So let me just share my screen a moment. Sorry, there we are. There we are. There should be a PowerPoint in front of you.
Yeah, but it can be a bit delayed.
Okay.
So Ben, we've got your screen with all of us on at the moment, we'll just leave it at the moment to see if it's a bit of a lag.
Okay.
I think your screen may be frozen.
Okay. Let's try this again. Apologies for this.
Yeah, we've got it now, expected.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you very much. Apologies for this. Brilliant. So I've got a TPO White Lackington number 1, 2025. This TPO was this served on 18th of September 2025. The grounds for serving this TPO were that I had received reports that the tree group was under threats and had previously suffered from unauthorised tree works, which was contrary to common law, and there was a perceived pressure for future works and removals upon the tree owner. So here we see a map of the approximate location of the tree group. So this TPO was done with the consent and support of the tree group owner, both the tenant and the landlord. So we can see here that it's adjacent to a priority habitat, which is the floodplain, as well as a priority habitat, which is deciduous woodlands. And the species composition of the group is all entirely native broadleaf species. And here we have an aerial view of the tree group. Apologies, these photos were taken in winter, so it doesn't quite have the same impact, but this is the tree group from Mill Lane. And the tree group from the public right-of-way, which runs behind the property. So a TEMPO was carried out, which is a tree evaluation method for preservation orders. This evaluates the condition of the tree group, longevity, visibility, any other special considerations, and any potential threats to the tree. This quantified method returned a score of 15, which advises that a TPO is defensible, and it's on the high end of TPO defensible. So the aim of this TPO was to ensure that any unauthorised works were dissuaded through giving the tree additional legal protection. This, as I say, this TPO was done with the consent and support of the tree owner. It received one objection from a neighbour. The reasons for the objection was that the neighbour deemed that the trees were not in a conservation area, that the trees were not under threat of vandalism, that the trees are not visible from a public space, such as a road or footpath, that the trees were not uncommon species, and that they provide very little ecological value. In response to this, I did advise that the trees did not need to be in a conservation area to be subjected to a TPO. In fact, the trees not being in a conservation area means they are under potentially a higher degree of threat. I advise that the trees are under pressure for removal and at risk from unauthorised works, that the trees are visible from a public right-of-way, which is path number CH149, as well as being visible from the end of Mill Lane and surrounding properties. I did also advise that the tree group is made up of common native species. However, this does not affect whether the tree group is worth preserving. One species within this group, the wild service tree, is also a very uncommon native species. I also advise that due to the native species composition, the diversity, as well as the proximity to numerous priority habitats, that this tree group was a high ecological specimen. So once again, this TPO is not in place to prevent any good or responsible management. It's just to ensure that any unauthorised works are not carried out and to make sure any works are done to a good standard. So with this in mind, my recommendation is that the tree preservation order is confirmed unmodified.
Okay, thank you very much. We have no members of the public wishing to speak on this application.
No, that's correct.
Are there any members who wish to make any comments or have any questions? Yes, Steve?
Right, just for clarity, if the issue is the quality of this group as a habitat and its diversity, was a woodland order considered as an alternative to a TPO?
I'm very sorry. The quality of the voice there isn't very good. I did pick up the ecological implications. The TPO has been placed primarily to protect the amenity value of the tree group. I just wish to address that this tree group has also high ecological value. Due to the tree group being visible from a public right of way, as well as from a road and surrounding properties, it has demonstrated high amenity value.
I'm hoping you can hear me better now. I asked if a woodland order had been considered as an alternative to a TPO, a woodland order.
I'm sorry, the quality isn't. Bear with me, see if I can improve it this end.
Then I think what has to be done is a woodland order being considered rather than the TPO.
I'm very sorry, it's not coming through. I do apologise.
I've just asked Steph if she'll send the question over chat for you.
That would be fantastic. Sorry about this. I know it'd be a lot easier if I was there in person.
Are there any other questions on the?
While we're waiting, if Peter can explain to those who don't know what a woodland order is, that might be helpful.
So the council recently, that used a woodland order north of the on the strip adjacent to crematorium at Yeovil. It basically prevents all works. It's not tree specific. You're just not allowed to do works in there without permission.
So yes, thank you, Stephanie, for posting that question. So a woodland order is a form of TPO. So TPOs come in three separate forms. There's individual TPOs for individual trees. There's group TPOs, which is what this is, and there's a woodland order, woodland TPO. They all broadly do the same thing, only that a woodland TPO would protect the woodland in perpetuity with any new growth coming up after the order was posted. I've decided to put a group TPO on this group with, due to the fact I don't think that this could constitute a woodland given its limited size.
Thank you very much for that, Ben. If there are no further questions, I'm happy for us to move into the debate. Would like to start. Al?
Well, I think if no one else is in agreement with it, I'm happy to propose if everyone else is.
Okay, so does anyone else wish to make any comments before I take the proposal? No, so we have a proposal to accept by Councillor Power, seconded by Councillor C. We have a show of hands for all those in favour. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ben, for that. Not sure if you can hear us, but thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
We move on to our next application, agenda item 6, which is planning application 25/02604 S73A. The Tinjagel, I'm going to pronounce that wrong because now I've been questioned on it. I know I'm going to get it wrong.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, councillors. I'm here on behalf of Jackie Churchill, who can't be here today. So it's her case that I'll do my best to talk you through. So this is an application to remove two conditions relating to an application which was permitted in 2007. The 2007 permission allowed for a two-storey side extension with an integral garage. So removal of these conditions would allow conversion of the garage, which has already happened, so that planning permission wouldn't be required and it would then fall back under permitted development rights. The converted garage sees one bedroom which is for a living carer. So since the report's been published, there is one update from the Highways Authority. Previously, they said standing advice applies. Jackie's discussed the application with the Highways team and confirmed that there are no objections to the application on the basis that it complies with the Somerset parking standards. So here's the site, just on the northern edge of Yeovil. We've got a few maps here. So this is showing that it's a semi-detached house. There is a shared driveway, which is open, but it's demarcated by a drainage ditch, which I've got some photos to show in a moment. It's within a residential cul-de-sac. So just a few angles here. And the site. So the 2007 commission includes these two conditions. So condition 3 removes permitted development rights to make any changes to the windows. And condition 4 removes permitted development rights to use the garage for any purposes other than parking. The condition 4, looking at the planning history, was included on the basis of Highways comments at that time, which recommended that condition. It's noted that at that time, the front driveway was part garden, part driveway, and that's since been amended under permitted development, so that the whole of the frontage of the property is now a driveway, so it's obviously has more capacity for parking. So here's the plans as existing, as prior to the garage conversion. So can you see the map? Yeah, here. So you can see here at the bottom is the front elevation. So you can see that there's a garage door there on the front, and the side elevation here, we've got a couple of openings at the ground floor level. So the proposed plans show on the frontage, the garage door, and then for a window, and then the side, same fenestration as previous. This plan just shows the parking, so there's room within the plot to park the cars, which is compliant with the Somerset parking standards. So we've got a couple of photos, so this is looking at the house on the front, so you can see this little line across, and that's the boundary. So anything left of that line is the parking for this property, and we can see the window change there, which is the garage door. And the next photo, we see it with the neighbouring property and their parking. So we can see a car in there at the moment, and plenty of room there for three to park. Little slide here just confirming the use. So the current use is for adults with support. So this comes within the C3 dwelling house use classes. So anything on that C3 list can change between each other without planning permission, unless permission development rights have been removed. So just really to reiterate that the use of the property as a household for adults with care is established, permitted, and it doesn't form part of the assessment of this application today. So paragraph 57 in the NPPF sets out the tests for planning conditions. And so in this case, it's concluded that these two conditions don't meet with the test for being necessary. So it's recommended that they are removed. The key considerations, use, as I say, is established and doesn't form part of the assessment process. It's considered in the same way as any other sort of private residence. So removal of these conditions and the assessment would be around residential community and highway safety, and particularly parking. And as I say, we haven't had an objection from the highway authority. So as such, the application is recommended for approval. Happy to take questions in due course. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we move to quick speakers. We've got no one wishing to speak in objection, no one wishing to speak in support. We do have Mr. Alan Flint from the Parish Council who wishes to address. If you'd like to use the microphone at the front there. Thank you very much. You'll have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me okay? Okay. Well, following our most recent parish council meeting, it was decided to unanimously oppose the application for the following reasons. Firstly, insufficient off-road parking for the supported care living arrangement. It is considered that the on-site parking does not meet the requirements of the use of the property. Secondly, in considering the amenity of the neighbours, they are clearly adversely affected by the proposed changes and the current use, which was unacceptable to the parish council. And to summarise, Tintagel Road is a residential area and not suitable for a commercial care operation. Considering these comments, Runton Parish Council felt obligated to attend the planning review in order to reinforce the local residents' views towards opposing this application.
Thank you. Okay, questions from members? Councillor
Chairman, I would like to ask for this application to be deferred because I would like to see the specific assessment of free parking spaces. Now, I saw on.
Sorry, can you give us those who got them?
I'd like to refer the application because I want to see the specific demonstration of 3 parking spaces. There was a brief flash of a view with something overlaid on it during your presentation. There's nothing in the planning file, and I visited the property. Essentially, the front parking lot is triangular. I can easily see 2 cars getting on there. I can see the arrangement that's on your that you put on screen, but I can't see how those cars got there because there is no drop curb and the manoeuvres required would be odd, to say the least. Members should be aware that the adjacent to this property is a shared drive where the owner's right to pass over but not to occupy, which used to lead to a garage which is now part of the house. So effectively, I think there are 2 parking spaces and 2 triangles, or a really odd manoeuvre, and the third vehicle landlocked. So I want to actually question whether there are 3 parking spaces functionally at this property. I think you might be able to store 3 vehicles on it with no gaps between them and no opening of doors. I might accept that, but I can't see how you can drive on and off 3 vehicles in any order. This view here doesn't really convey, but it shows very nicely on the planning view. So if you go to the planning file, the picture marked parking, you'll see this. Well, you can see it's on there. In the top left there are 3 rectangles. However, there's also on the planning file a street view of a vehicle parked on the property, which makes them to question the size of those rectangles. Usually you have to open the doors once you've parked. So, still immediately adjacent to each other, you've got to have a visitor gap. And those seem to be those details. So I think somebody's made that happen rather than made a reasonable assessment of whether there's functional parking there. And I'd also point out that there's no drop curb to the left-hand half of the cell. So all I'm doing is saying, please, can we see a realistic assessment of the available space? That to me just gets odd.
Okay, thank you very much. Could we have the picture of the actual driver of the car on the screen? And could I ask if our highways officer can comment on the question that's been raised? Rachel, can I just check that you can hear us? I'm just asking if you can comment on the question posed by Councillor Seaver, said, is the drive realistically large enough to park 3 vehicles?
Do you want me to respond to that?
Yeah, if you can.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is those parking spaces are shown, and it's based on the Somerset parking dimensions, so the space that you would need there would consider opening the doors, so things like, you know, running to the supermarket, the space there is kind of marked out, so you have got enough room, so the highways officer has looked at it and considers it complies. Obviously, there is some parking in the front, so there would be, you know, the one on the end would need to move out, but that is standard in new builds that we would have them, you know, one parked in front of the other, so you'd have to move it. So the Highways Authority has said that they are happy that meets the requirements. A drop curb is required, agreed. That is community development. So the applicant would be able to apply for that. They need a license from the Highway Authority to make that connection, but I wouldn't be concerned about that being delivered.
Councillor Seaver?
I think if the applicant had intended to deliver it, it would have already been done. But extensive tarmac work done in the area, including to the back end of the pavement. But I agree with your assessment that in order to work the way that it's shown, it would have to come off the front. But if I can, those are actually the highways policy spaces and not an attempted door vehicle. I see the point.
With your permission, I'd like to go back to that, but just, I think that's a really good point, and, you know, if members were minded, we could potentially put on a condition to require a drop curb is installed within a certain amount of time. I'm noting this is retrospective, you know, perhaps give it a 6 or 12 month time period to require that to come on, because that would help facilitate easier access on and off.
Is it a question?
It's really the mechanism for that is we need to bring it up as an amendment to reordering, because it sounds to me as though you feel it's also happening to the officer. So, but I agree. If the report had that suggestion, I would agree with it, because you know, clearly you can see how it makes the functional space work better, but it also stops people parking half an lap in the front of the garden, because you could park right up to the drop curb.
Any further questions? Councillor Page?
Thank you, Chair. Could I just clarify, is this property owned by an individual and it's a conversion to help them in terms of a carer? Or is this a care home? Somebody mentioned a care home. I got this right.
Thank you. It's within the C3 use class, so it's in the same use class category as a residential. So it's used in the same way as a private residence, but it's a subcategory within that as adults living with a carer. So there's 4 adults or up to 4 adults living with one carer at one time. So this garage conversion is a room for the carer. There's one carer at one time, and it's to help people live as independent as possible. So I understand that they're encouraged to kind of do their own shopping, but they wouldn't be driving. So there wouldn't be cars, but for those occupants, there would be a car for the one carer, and then potentially 2 in the crossover, and then visitors in the same way that any other dwelling could have visitors.
So just as a follow-up, is it a commercial company that owns the property?
I'm struggling to see the relevance in this. If we're looking at the details of the application, we don't need to really go into who owns the property. That's not really a planning situation. Are there any further questions at this point? Councillor Seaman and Councillor Fairclough.
Thank you, Chair. A question on policy. I see in the report it refers to this as a dwelling house for 4 adults with living together within means as a single single household. There are 5 bedrooms, and this is use class C3. My understanding is C3 actually has a limit as well, but it's not the one in the report. Am I right that there's a 6-person C3 there?
Yeah, it's 6 people, so there's 4 residents there, plus the 1 carer, so like.
So my question is, if that's the policy position, how many double bedrooms are there in this property? Because there are 5 bedrooms in the property now that it's been extended by this works.
I'm presuming that the carer then having a bedroom that would stay overnight to provide that care.
My understanding is that the room which has been built in the garage includes the carer's bedroom. And there were previously 4 bedrooms. So there's now 5 bedrooms, but I'm presuming that some of the previous bedrooms would be double bedrooms, occupancy of 2. So have we actually got a problem with the assessing this as a use class C3, given the scale of the property?
Well, the use is restricted to 6, so if the use intensified and they had more than 1 person in each bedroom, then it would bring them into a new use class and they need planning permission.
Chair, if I just come back, you're assessing this at the use class that's, sorry, the use that's presented and not the use class. This is a dwelling house with 5 bedrooms.
Yeah, well, the Somerset parking standards are based on the number of bedrooms and that complies with it. The way it's 3.
It's at the parking position. My question was, is it in the right use class anyway?
I think we're straying away from the application now. And I think if you're going to have these kind of questions, it would be really useful to pose them to the planning officer prior to the meeting as well.
Chair, I'm sure you appreciate,
and then I am going to move on.
appreciate that some things come to you as questions come back and clarify. But my point is that a section 27 application to remove the condition wouldn't be the appropriate path for this application. It would become a change of use little application if it were coming in as not use class C3 and for this use.
The officers are satisfied that it's within the C3 use class. Based on the application that's been submitted, we can assess it against those parking standards or not. We haven't seen anything in the application to cause reason to assume it needs a change of use application. It falls within that use class, so officers will be satisfied with that.
Okay, thank you. If there are no further questions, I'm happy. Sorry, Councillor Kirby.
Thank you, Chair. I just really wanted to touch on, and I think it's mostly been addressed, is the future use of the property if it gets to a state it's no longer being used as a care. And I think my question was pretty much answered. You said the 3 parking spaces are right for that number of bedrooms. So I think my question's been answered. That's what Chair.
Okay, if there are no further questions, I'm happy to move us into the debate. Who would like to start with? Councillor C.
Sorry, Chair. Thank you for your fulsome answers. I think in the light of the advice received, and I am going with those are parking space markings, then I think the concerns which I have are mitigated by your answers and process and the parking spaces. But I would agree with the suggestion which you made during one of your responses, and would therefore suggest that we ask for an additional condition to place a drop curb so that the full parking area can be safely accessed. Subject to that, thanks at the age.
Councillor Ashton.
Yeah, the condition for the windows, they're saying that there's no lack of amenity by putting a window on the front there, but does not the condition apply to the whole house still? Or is that condition only put in for restricting a window at the front of the house? I mean, what you said is that this window, putting the window instead of the garage door has no impact on the amenity. But surely that condition applies to the whole of the rest of the house for a reason. You wouldn't have put that condition on for no reason at all. And you're saying you'll take the condition off for the whole of the house, apart from one window there. It seems a bit sort of bizarre to take condition off just because of one window. No, not making sense.
Yeah, thank you. Good question. I don't know if you picked up on the slides showing the side elevations. So when the extension was first built, there were windows on the ground floor, and now it's been converted. There isn't any changes to the window. So it was that permitted development condition means that the local planning authority would then have the opportunity to consider any windows proposed. But that kind of change has already happened. So there aren't any windows, and the officer assessment is that, but considering the context of the site, it isn't necessary to put that condition on. You've got to be very careful of when you restrict permitted development rights, and in this case, there isn't a need to restrict it. Windows that could come forward would be acceptable. There isn't a strong reason for that. Having reassessed it.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand the appeal on conditions because we've had a failed appeal on the Hollies just recently read out. But there must have been a reason for the condition to be applied in the first place. And are we ignoring that?
I would say we're ignoring that, and we're reassessing that after a long period, and looking at that condition in the context of those conditions tests. It's concluded that it doesn't meet those conditions tests. It's not necessary, so that's why it's recommended to remove it, as opposed to applying for planning for that frontage and keep that in the same place. It's concluded that removal of that condition is correct.
Sure. So just to come back on that further, I believe one of the issues in relation to windows on the flanks in relation to the property would be that prior, when the permission was first granted back in 2007, 2008, there was no permitted development restriction in relation to first floor higher windows in terms of obscure glazing. So this condition was likely imposed in relation to ensuring privacy for neighbouring properties on that basis. So we have that in place now as part of the permitted development. Ground floor windows obviously wouldn't be an issue because side facing windows would be subject to fencing or other boundary treatments that would be up to 2 meters in height. So we preserve people's privacy for neighbouring properties.
Okay. That's right. Did anyone else wish to add anything at this point? If not, I'm happy to go back to Councillor Steve and congratulate him.
So the gentleman proposing that we accept the officer's recommendation with one addition, which is a condition to secure a drop curb sufficient and suitable to address the whole of the parking area.
Thank you. Are you happy for a timeline on that? We have a second for that proposal. We'll take a pick and choose. I'll let Seth choose whoever. Okay. We both went up at the same time. All those in favour? Yeah, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. We move on to agenda item 7, which is the Oxford Theatre Henford Hill. We'll just give the officers a second to swap over.
I should have come on now. Yeah, yeah, well, I think I'm trying to. Thank you. Failed. I think that we do it. Look, I don't know, we need to. Oh, it's not appreciated, to be like this as well. We're going to both sides of it at once. Oh, that was a good one.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair. Thank you. This is an application for the Octagon Theatre, obviously, as a go, for refurbishment and extension to the theatre with improvements externally and internally. I'm running through the slides as quick as I can. There's quite a few plans to go through, but we'll come back if you've got any queries as we go through. This is the site location. I imagine most of you are fairly familiar with the site in any event, and being in the centre of the oval. This one shows the surrounding area, obviously within the central location, and again the aerial view showing the surrounding buildings. We've got the offices here, list of buildings adjacent, and the park surrounding the bottom. There we go. Sorry, all right, let me back up. This is just some photographs of the existing building and the surrounding area, and the main frontage. You can see the modern flats to the side. This is showing the car parking at the front and the listed building adjacent. Looking down towards from the upper sort of car park level, the rear of the building, and the existing access to the front of the building, and some of the rear service area of the building, and the parkland to the rear. The key considerations that we're looking at today are listed there for you, and we'll talk through those with relation to the slides that we have to show you. The location plan, you can see the building itself and the adjacent car park and the access, which is here. This shows the existing block plan, and particular to note in here is you've got existing parking facilities at the front, which when we look at what's now proposed, that parking is removed from the front. We do retain some parking alongside, and the disabled parking spaces are relocated here. But this gives an overall improvement to the frontage of the building, but will allow dropping off point for disabled access. And you'll see the areas shaded blue are the areas of extension, which are the entrance and foyer area at the front, and the backstage facilities in here, above the stage and behind. Just on the ground floor, that's a note somewhere. This shows you again, the blue are the new work. So at the ground floor, you've got the frontage with a foyer area with the entrance at this level, which would be from the disabled parking and dropping off area, lift access throughout the building, and this area also includes studio frontage here.
and the back of house facilities provide improvements with dressing rooms and office and storage space. UWC is provided, and this is what they call the screen dock here, which is system where all the scenery and so on is brought into the building for performances. That remains as existing. At the first floor level, this is where there's a new entrance provided, which is a walkway through from the car park at this level, making a new foyer entrance here, which will include a cafe, the box office reception, new toilets and offices, and more seating for the cafe. The auditorium remains as existing, but that is proposed to have new seating, and that will also include some improved provision for seating for disabled people within the auditorium itself. The second floor, I'll run through these quite quickly because there's less happening at the upper floor levels in terms of the public space. The backstage area includes more provision in these other floors, particularly the void space over the stage area, which is for lifting the scenery up and down, and that's a new extension to the back, and improved facilities for dressing rooms and storage and all the technical bits and pieces at the house. Second floor is more of the same with the backstage facilities there, and you'll see on the roof of the foyer cells where there are some plant equipment facilitated, and that has some screening to it to avoid that being too visually damaging. The third floor, there's an existing plant room and the void continuing over the stage, and you've just got the roof of the rear extension on the back behind that tower. And at the fourth floor level, there's just the tower structure going up to that level. Roof plan, and then going down to the bottom at the basement level, there's facilities for dressing rooms and toilets for performers and the orchestra pit, and even goes down further where there's a little plant room at the lower basement level. So several floors to get through. More interestingly are the elevations, and I've put alongside here the existing and the proposed, so you can see then the alterations. The main elements on this view are this new foyer extension from the front, which is constructed largely in brick and glazing. So it's a full height, two floors. So you've got the ground floor entrance down here, and this is the upper first floor entrance coming from the car park. Quickly whiz through the other elevations for you and show some of the different views. This shows the main tower above the stage area, which is where the improvements are to facilities there. That's to the rear, that's facing towards the park. This gives you an idea of both elements, the front extension and the rear line tower here. Again, as you're looking from the other side, but the similar relationship with those. This might help to give the overall view of the proposal in total, because you can see the entranceway, the walkway here into the first floor foyer, the lower foyer, which has the sitting access, and the tower towards the rear. And these are some part of compression views of how the development can be perceived when complete. This is the walkway to the new main entrance. And the views here. This is new ground floor level. One of the key considerations is the heritage impact of this, and this slide shows you the boundary of the conservation area and the adjacent listed buildings, and the key ones being the two buildings here. This is grade 2 star and grade 2. You'll see from the report the consideration is, whilst there is some impact on that, the setting of those buildings at present is compromised by the amount of parking and tarmac to the frontage of the building, and therefore those improvements with removing some of that, improving the landscaping for the frontage is seen as some benefit to the setting of those listed buildings. This is the grade 2 star Henford Manor. What was known as the former stables, so that was the grade 2 building, adjacent to the frontage as well. And you'll see from the report that although there is considered to be less than substantial harm, as is the official term, that is outweighed by the other benefits of the scheme as a whole. And together with that are the landscaping proposals, and again, you'll see in the report there only 3 trees are lost as a result of this scheme, whereas the previous much larger scheme had considerable more effect on the trees, particularly those to the rear in the park area. But this shows that 3 trees could be removed. The landscape plans include improved planting along this bank from the modern offices here, and improved planting to the front. And the beautiful tree at the front here, the blue cedar, is retained as existing. This shows the tree survey plan. The trees that to be lost, T15 is this one over here, which is growing out of the wall, and the 2 that are closest at the back to where that extension comes round the back, those 2 are unfortunately to be lost because they would be too close. But there is a 2-for-1 replacement planting for those lost trees. I just need to update members on conditions. Since the application and report was completed, there has been further discussions with our own tree officer, who was here earlier this meeting, and he has now received the arboricultural method statement and tree protection plan from the applicants, and he's now satisfied that that is going to protect the trees and provide that methodology for the works, and therefore the conditions that he previously suggested are slightly amended to relate to compliance and implementation with that method statement. So conditions 4 is amended as is there. It's a bit wordy, but it's basically just providing the usual tree protection measures in accordance with the submitted statement. Condition 5 is just to relate to the planting to be provided and further detail of that. We have that landscape plan included, which will be an approved plan, but this is to provide a specific detail of that planting as requested by the tree officer. And that means that condition 6 would be relating to just hard landscaping only, because the other 2 conditions will cover all the planting requirements. So coming back to just those key considerations, you'll see that the principle is accepted. It's a town centre location, and there are considerable benefits from the improvements to the scheme. Highways, there is the existing access and the car parking available. The slight loss to the frontage is not seen as a major issue. There is cycle parking provided and a travel plan that will be conditioned. The appearance is considered to be acceptable. As I've mentioned, the tree loss is compensated with replacement planting with landscaping schemes. From the ecology point of view, there would be mitigation and biodiversity net gain will be provided by off-site credits that have been proposed by the applicants. I've mentioned the less than substantial harm for the heritage impact and no residential impact on amenity being in the central location as the existing premises, and particularly the previous permission that's been mentioned from 2023, which some members may recall, was a much larger scheme, and that it did include 2 cinemas and a bigger studio and much larger extensions and broader extensions. Also, this is a reduced scheme, but that previous history obviously is a material consideration. And on that basis, the current scheme we consider to be acceptable and is recommended to, as per the report, other than those amendments to the conditions regarding the trees and forest conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Questions? No, apologies. We're going to go to public questions first, which there are none. There's no objective, no supporters. There's no idea from the parish council who wishes to speak, no board member. So we'll go to questions. Councillor Webb.
Can I clarify, we've just heard mention of the agent. Are we not the applicant here?
Oh, sorry, the council are the applicants. I've been obviously working with the agents, as in the architects and the consultants that have been submitting the details of the application. Yeah, so when I say the agent, I've been speaking with the architects. I don't deal with the council.
But for clarification,
yes,
it is a Somerset Council.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Application. Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Ashton and Councillor C.
Yeah, it's regarding the movement of parking spaces in the front. These are disabled parking spaces that are removing. Is that not something that's actually, I mean, you mentioned that that disabled people can be dropped off there, but you're actually removing a single occupant disabled car from actually the disabled person from actually getting there by taking away their parking space in the front of the building.
No, there's 2 disabled spaces that are repositioned.
I missed it.
Yeah, sorry, but there are some other general parking spaces that are removed.
I didn't see where the.
Yeah, sorry, let me just. Yes, so that's the existing block plan.
Yep.
Where there are
to the front.
some general parking here and the 2 disabled spaces there, and then the proposed one relocates the disabled spaces to here, but would allow dropping off in the frontage there.
Apologise. Yep, I missed that.
Councillor C.
Yes, just a question. Conditions 5 and 6 are both down as pre-commencement conditions. I'm curious as to why this is planting and laying out of plants, etc.
Good question. That's a condition suggested by our tree officer. It doesn't necessarily have to be any works commencing, but there does need to be.
I think particularly it's related to part C, which is to do with the protection of trees during building works.
Yeah.
I think that's in a different condition.
Yes, although that's covered in condition 4 with the method statement of tree protection. So I take your point. Just thinking on the spot what we could do to.
Should we park that for a minute and then I'll give you some time to come back to that and we'll take some further questions. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Chair, and forgive me if I've missed this in the text, but I think when we first considered the previous application, there was an increase in seats from 622 to 900. Am I right that there's no increase in seats?
No, the auditorium stays as it is. There are going to be new seating provided, and some provision made for improvements for seating for disabled, but no, there will be no increase in seating numbers. No.
Chair, if you indulge me with the follow-up to that, and I don't know how relevant this is, but it just it's playing in my mind. Last time we looked at this, we actually had a business plan that came with it, that we looked at that justified the seating. We haven't had that this time. I know that's not necessarily a planning consideration, but I think it would be quite useful to have that change of business plan. Thank you, Chairman.
I'm guessing if that's something you wanted to look at, speak to the relevant officer dealing with this in county, as in on the business side of the portfolio holder, but you're right, it would actually be a planning consideration. Councillor Webb.
I'm trying to deal with it as it is, but I am going to hark back as well. A lot of the problems with the last application were to do with the delivery vehicles entering the, if you go back to the plan. And is that any wider than, is that going to be wide so the large vehicles can take their large bits of scenery to go into the new fly tower? Because there's no room to turn around for a lorry down there. They have to sort of back out or back in. I just wonder if any provision has been made to facilitate that part of the building.
My understanding is that is as existing, and it remains as existing, as I recall was the case for the previous application.
They did, Judge.
So obviously, those vehicles manoeuvre in and out of that space at present, and will carry on likewise.
Yeah, which seemed to be, there might have been an opportunity to do something about that, but if it's going to be the same before, it's the same.
I think this space is quite limited around the access beyond that part of the building.
Thank you, Councillor Kendall.
Thank you, Chair. Just following on from Councillor Ashton's comment about the parking, this is going to be more of an interest to a lot more wider people. You're just talking about 2 disabled spaces. What are the rest of the spaces for? Just normal public? Or have they been increased? I would thought have increased it. I'm just comparing it to the Western Entertainment Venue at the moment, where they've got more disabled spaces which are full. And that's one question. Second question is the building going to be DDI compliant from start to finish? And so,
absolutely.
Well, no, I've got to ask a question.
Yeah.
You've got it, your answer is going to be noted in a minute. And the third comment is, during the construction, the delivery lorries and lorries doing whatever they're doing, we don't want the same problem we're getting at the north end of Yeovil, where we seem to diminish the fact of wheel washing when leaving the site now, because we have this problem now with torrential rain, and it's making a mess. It's causing floods. It's causing block drains. I'd just like to have a condition, if possible. We used to do it years ago in this area south. The 4 lorries that left each side, they are will wash and clean, and not spreading their buff with the on the ground process.
Right, so I've got, firstly, the parking.
Yeah.
There's the 2 disabled spaces at the frontage at the moment, which will be, as I said, relocated. Most parking obviously will be in the public car parks, and there would be disabled spaces available in those. And there is a new entranceway from the car park, which is a level access into the first floor. So if somebody did park in the car park, they would have level access into the new foyer at first floor level. And there are sort of lift facilities throughout the building for disabled people. There are also new disabled toilets being provided, plus a changing space toilet as well.
Okay.
Now what's the next bit?
The lorries.
We have got a construction management plan condition, I think. I'm just looking.
I didn't read it.
Yes, that's in condition 10. The construction management plan does include method of prevent mud being carried onto the highway, including wheel wash facilities. That's a fairly standard construction management plan condition. Obviously, compliance and checking and enforcement of that is another matter. That's to be done during the phase, so that would enable that to be enforced if there were issues.
Who would enforce, sorry, who would enforce it?
The planning department, it'd be a planning condition to be enforced by planning enforcement officers.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor Wells?
Yes, sorry, to come back in. The heritage aspect, I can't try to find the expression you used about the less than
substantial harm.
Less than substantial harm. It's only one down from substantial harm, I presume. Because it's I noticed the distances were 35 and 40 metres away from the listed building. And one hopes on the plan that the instant planting going to be between the listed buildings and the site, or there is currently trees there at the moment, I know, but is it going to be well shielded so that the less than whatever heritage is protected?
Yeah, less than substantial harm is the phrase, which is well used by heritage experts. And if it's considered that it would cause less than substantial harm, which can be the view here, but that's less than substantial harm to the setting of listed buildings. Obviously, there's no physical impact on the buildings themselves, but that is weighed against the public benefit of the scheme as a whole. And there is, well, this is the landscape plan.
Yeah.
In particular, there's planting here. The issue with the setting of listed buildings, and particularly this one here, now that the adverse impact of that is generally this parking in front of it, which is not part of the site. So that's a separate issue. But there is new planting in here, and the relationship to this building is largely unchanged. The impact would be of the extensions here and here, but it's the Pembroke Manor, the main frontage is to the highway. When you're within this car park area, you've just got the back of that building, which is still listed, obviously, but less of importance than the frontage in terms of the impact. And that has been considered by our conservation officer. I haven't had comment from English Heritage on this application. They deferred to our own conservation officer on that, but having said that, they were acceptive of the previous application, which was obviously a much larger scheme and had a much larger impact.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are no further questions, I'm happy to move into the debate. Would you like to start something? See?
Having heard this reduced scheme, and also seeing what some of the people like to do to stress on Rivendell, I'm really quite pleased this is before us. The development application that we have seems well considered. I had similarly gone through and thought about metal construction and so on. And I actually think the conditions are well constructed, so I congratulate the team that have put the actual conditions together. In a previous authority, of course, we considered a previous scheme which had substantially the same fly tower and also substantially the same problems with lorries moving around the site. And I believe that the previous authority put its concerns to rest when debating that, but it was essentially fairly obvious that whilst the Manor House, you might see the fly tower above the Manor House. I would say that this application has improved materials in that regard and improved finishes in that regard. But you have to remember that taking the photograph that was shown by the officer, you've got a large concrete building immediately to your right shoulder. So I'm afraid the ship sailed as regards when there's a substantial harm, and it's already a fairly damaged area. I really like the accessibility improvements. I think they've been, whilst I might have to put a set of racing blinkers on my wife to get her across the bridge, everything else about it, I think is very gaining a lot, very little for a much reduced budget. So well done, the team. I can't see any particular problems in this application, so I would be supporting it.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to second that.
I don't think there wasn't a proposal there yet.
And then I propose we recommend it.
Microphone on.
Then I'd just like to go with the officer's recommendation and approve this application.
Okay, thank you for giving both the second. Is there anyone else wishing to speak prior to that? Mr. Curley?
I just wanted to say my support for this. I think it's a great asset, and it's a great asset for the community, and it gives me great pleasure to support this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Kendall.
Yeah, I just want to make a statement on the NPPF 14 for climate change. Does state that local planning authorities should also give significant weight to the need to support energy efficiency in new builds or on builds. And it might not be a planning consideration, but it is written in the NPPF, and that includes solar panels and maybe heat pumps.
I can only go back
I know.
through memory, Councillor Kendall, but I'm trying to think back to the original business plan and the bits going back to it. Whilst there may not be solar panels on this project, I believe that there was a whole new lighting and sound system, which I imagine would be of considerable less energy usage than the current one there, but I'm not sure if that adds.
I agree with you, but that's like 1980s technology. We now have modern technology. Lots of big buildings are putting solar arrays to alleviate these exclusion electricity bills. I stand to be corrected, but we did a lot of research on this years ago, and they do work. Solar panels do work, and I think you'd be frightened if you did the electric bills which worked before and what they're going to be in the future. I'm just going by the MPP. That's all.
Okay, thank you. If there are no further comments on this one, we have a recommendation and a seconder. I'd just like to say, I had twice over that this has been unfortunately closed for some time, and I think the team have put in a considerable amount of work. I'm really pleased to see this application report, and happy again to see this moving forward with the project. And I thank everyone who's been involved. We have a proposed seconder, so I'm going to show of hands for those in favour. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so we'll give the officers a quick moment to swap over. We will be next looking at open tape for planning applications, planning of Gate Carriage Broadway in which language. Which one? Too horrible. They tell you don't want to be there. So we fix it. They said names for a reason. If you're not back before it starts, you're going to take half time for a while. We'll Kevin do that as well.
I do.
Yeah.
It's, you're the one, did you want to, there's a lot of it, whether the worst you think are. That time. According to budgets, looking, so that's because, all the structure is. Didn't trust you.
If you do leave, we are about to start, you will not be able to take part in the debate. I'm just forewarning you.
Sorry, it'd be nice to have a short break.
Okay, thank you very much. This is the landlord of Oldgate House, Portway Langford, and I will hand you over to own presentations.
Sorry, for one moment, let's get back to it. I'm sorry to delay. Oh, yeah.
Yes, actually, that's very
It's just, well, just thinking.
It's literally doing that and trying to open a PowerPoint presentation. It's the white side.
What's like we start the laptop and then, yeah, we're fast grading as well.
The planning officer spoiled my plans to get to the next update, but I apologise to the members of the public who've been sat waiting for some time. But whilst we try and restart the laptop, beat the 3 mice and get to spinning again, we're just going to take a 5-minute break. So anyone that don't pop a toy in that brain. But please be back by 3:45.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound like the
Should we move over?
Nice.
Yeah.
Right, Mike. If everyone else back in the room. Okay, so again, this is the land north of Oldgate House, Portway, Langford, and I hand you the information.
Afternoon. I'm Eric Buckley, I'm case officer for this application. Became case officer in late 2024. Before that, there was another case officer who's been going on now for about 2.5 years through this. The application relates to land north of the Oldgate House. On field to the west of Langport and to the south of the hamlet of Portfield. The application is an outline application with all matters reserved except for access. In other words, only the principle and the access are under consideration here with matters, all reserved matters reserved for a later application. The application is for the erection of 22 dwellings, up to 22 dwellings, so that means that a future reserved matters application could come forward with fewer than that, if the applicant decides to submit an application for fewer than that. On this PowerPoint slide, you can hopefully see that. The colour looks a bit odd, but you can see the blue dot that I made on the west side of Langport there. You can see the river that kind of goes diagonally through the middle. This one's a little more clearer. Up to an extent, the application site is surrounded on 3 sides by residential development, albeit very low density suburban development. See some of the buildings there. The site is, as you see, like rectangular shaped in agricultural use, with the A road to the south and the C road to the east. Image. So yeah, as I was explaining, it's an outline application. There is a layout plan that's been submitted, but on my members that's indicative. It's possible a reserve matters application that layout can be changed. So it's indicative. The part of the plan that shows the access is definitive and part of this application. If they try to amend that, reserve matter stage, they would have to amend this permission. So here's the site plan that they've submitted. So a summary recommendation to begin with, the recommendation is that a plan permission be granted, subject to the completion of a section 106 obligation and the plan conditions at the end of the officer report. Therefore, final decision won't be made today. The decision will be delegated to the head of planning in consultation with the chair when that, to allow that legal agreement to be drafted and completed. The section 106 is proposed to be secure the following: 35% affordable housing contributions. In the officer report, it gives an example of what that would be if 22 dwellings were to come forward, but because the application is only up to 22, it's not possible to give a definitive figure for that at this stage. Financial contributions of various kinds. These are to mitigate the impact of the proposal by increasing the local population and the impact that would have on local infrastructure. And finally, the installation and maintenance of a PTP. There's an update which I'll explain in the point of presentation on that point. A slight clarification in the officer report on that issue, but the reason why it's relevant is to do with the phosphates, because we want to ensure that there's nutrient neutrality, and one method of doing that in this case is to have sewage treatment quality on site. So the key considerations are principal development, nutrient neutrality, publishing drainage, design character, and access to highways. There's also other relevant issues that I've discussed in the officer report. This presentation isn't comprehensive, and obviously like the officer report is taken as read, and members will obviously discuss any other points that are in the officer report that aren't raised in this presentation if they have questions. So in relation to principal development, in terms of local planning policy, we consider that policy SS5 and SS1 are most relevant compared as opposed to SS2. I think there's a honest debate to be had about that, depending on your interpretation, whether the site relates more towards Langport, which is a larger settlement, or relates more towards Portfield, which is a small hamlet. The local plan policy SS2 is focused on small rural settlements, and so therefore, if you consider it relates more towards the hamlet, policy SS2 would be the primary local planning policy. Whereas if you consider it, Langport is the relevant settlement, then policy SS1 and SS5 would be the most relevant. I want to emphasise to members that at the end of the day, we don't have a 5-year housing land supply, and it's been for many years we've considered these policies to be out of date, both policy SS2 and SS5. And as the officer report explains the reasons for that. The tilt balance is engaged because of that, for that reason, and this directs decision makers to grant planning permission unless there are the reasons for refusing development are clear in the NPPF, those particular issues. For example, flood risk is one issue that NPPF says can provide a clear reason for refusing development. And then more commonly, the second bullet point there, any adverse impact of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh benefits. So in this case, the application site is a sustainable location within safe walking distance of local services in Langport. there's an existing pavement, a relatively wide pavement eastwards into the settlement, where residents, future residents would be able to easily access these services. It's just listed there some of the services that are within walking distance: library, supermarket, bus stops, village hall, pubs, GP surgery, churches, gyms, schools, takeaway shops, sports and social clubs. There has been concern in regard to principal development about the subsuming of the village of Portfield within Langport. I'll go back to the map in a moment. But our recommendation is that the weight to be given to maintaining existing settlement boundaries adjacent to highly sustainable settlements in a situation where we don't have a 5-year housing demand supply and we haven't allocated sites and local plan for decades, that it would be appropriate to permit housing development between those settlements, notwithstanding the desirability perhaps of maintaining that distinction between the two. So this is a photograph of the road, the A road, just south of the application site, and the pavement. You can see there's quite a fairly wide pavement, and I think most users would feel comfortable walking along it. I'll move on to nutrient neutrality. Appropriate assessments are being undertaken, and actually, and the nutrient neutrality officer had no objection to the proposal. The proposal involves, so actually before I go to that, I'll maybe just explain. In a situation where nutrient neutrality is not an issue to consider, planning officers generally don't go into this level of detail for the foul waste disposal method of development, which are governed by other regulations. But in this case, the primary purpose of going into this level of detail is to assure ourselves that the development is nutrient neutral. And Natural England many years ago advised that that's a requirement for new residential area schemes in the area. So in this case, the method of foul waste disposal would be via a package treatment plant, PTP. Somewhat unusually in this case, the applicant has managed to get a letter from Albion Water to adopt the PTP, which, as the Environment Agency have confirmed in second correspondence, exempts them from a requirement to connect to a public sewer nearby, which we typically have expected, but in this case, the Albion Water is effectively considered I think the term is an NAV, and they have a kind of statutory undertaking themselves. So there's, in addition to the on-site PTP that would serve the proposed dwellings and ensure that they're possibly nutrient neutral. In addition to that, the applicants also proposed a mitigation by using that on-site PTP for two nearby dwellings across the road, who are currently relying on an on-site septic tank. And therefore that will create a betterment, which they're using that betterment to offset the impact of this proposal. So the clarification I wanted to make on this in the office report is that there's sort of reference in the office report to two PTPs, but I just want to make really clear, which I didn't fully appreciate till now, that it's just a single PTP. So in this case, the PTP on-site would be both serving the on-site dwellings and also those two off-site dwellings. That's an arrangement the applicant's made. Flood risk and drainage. So the Environment Agency and the local, the Flood Risk Authority have reviewed and Drainage Board, I should say, reviewed the proposals and no objections. There were a few months of back and forth over the drainage scheme details. These will be resolved to the satisfaction of those consultees. Further permissions will be necessary from the Environment Agency and the Flood Authority in the future. Design characters. Because it's an outline application, the test or the assessment that we're making is not whether the design proposed is acceptable, because the indicative, the site plan is only indicative, and those details will be submitted at a later application. The assessment of whether an acceptable design and layout and so forth could come forward in a reserve matter stage, because it would be too late at the reserve matter stage to conclude otherwise. A landscape and visual appraisal will be submitted with the application, which considers the impact of the proposal of up to 22 dwellings from the various viewpoints and considers the impact would be minor or neutral. Which we agree with. There's been some objections and concerns relating to the impact and the change of the character of the area that a proposal like this could cause. It's accepted that the erection of 22 dwellings would of course result in a change in the character of the area inevitably. However, the change must be considered, and not all changes are inherently harmful, and it could be considered with the existing character, which I would argue is relatively suburban already, as some of those images that we'll go back to show. As with the site, all the hedgerows around the site are proposed to be retained, except for the section around the access, which we'll come to again in a moment. I was also consulted on the proposal and has no objection, subject to conditions. The application was supported by a transport statement, the traffic count and speed survey, and argues that there would be no perceptible traffic impact. In this case, access is not preserved matter, so it must be fully considered within this application, whereas some highways matters such as parking and layout would be primarily dealt with at a reserved matter state. New access is proposed onto a C road. I think there was a comment about whether the road is actually called Brookfield. I agree that probably locally it's not known as that, but that was the name used in the National Street Gazette. But I appreciate it's probably not what it's referred to as. There's also a comment made that perhaps it would be better to have the access onto the A road, the A378. I think the officer report, I know that while that probably would be more desirable, I think due to the levels, it's somewhat impractical, and the applicant has made the decision to they would prefer an access on that C road. I would object to that. But it's quite a safe point of view. The pedestrian access is proposed in the southeast corner, which is separate from the vehicular access, and that would just allow slightly faster connection for pedestrians from the proposed development onto the existing pavement, and then you can either go east or Langport or west. This is a section of this will be off-site on the highway land, and so therefore that's going to secure a glamping condition, which is essentially the type of condition requiring an applicant to do something outside of their land. So these are some photographs. This is looking northwards into the village of Portfield. So the actual application site is behind this image. It's in the other direction. Just the other direction. And so at the top of that ridge is the A road. Another photo of that moment. Just note that on the left-hand side, there's a existing access, agricultural access, and that access is going to be a future residential access. There's been an application committed there, which is explained in the officer report, and that development is sort of between Langport and the village of Portfield, so that sort of separation has already been in recent years. But I don't believe those dwellings have been are not fully under construction yet. This is the access. So this, sorry, though, let me clarify. This isn't the access. This is the access from the C road. This is C road onto the A road. So this is. I'll go to the access from the field onto the C road in a moment. As the highway officer considers, and as we consider, there's ample visibility in both directions. There's quite a wide road of access. I'll maybe to go to some photos actually before I move on there. So this photo here is showing where the access would be. I'll explain this again in a later session, but there's two trees there in front. Then in the officer report, there was an error where it says no trees will be felled, which is a mistake, that those two trees in front would be felled. And this, as hopefully you've read the addendum to the officer report, where it explains that, as there's additional comments from the tree officer on that. Unfortunately, the report submitted by the applicant didn't include those two in the tree schedule, which is unfortunate, but obviously we picked it up. Back. So the proposal is not liable for biodiversity net gain, as all new applications such as this would be. In this case, it's because it was submitted several years ago. Before that was a statutory obligation of requirement. So the ecology officer ensures no objection to the proposal subject to conditions. Go on to planning balance. In the proposal would be contrary to a plain reading of policy SS5. So in the office report explains in more detail how SS5 was sort of conceived in the, well, explicitly in the policy, sort of an interim policy until allocations were made. And in the interim period, the directions of growth for various settlements, including Landport, those allocations never came forward, and therefore less weight should be given to that policy. So I advise. We have no statutory consultancy objections to the proposal. The tilt balance is engaged, the location is highly sustainable, and it's a walking distance from a range of services. Proposal will result in a number of public benefits, including 35% affordable housing. On the basis of 22 dwellings, this would be 6 social rent and 2 shared ownership. Off-site pedestrian improvements, economic benefits during construction. And then, although these are benefits as such, there are mitigations for the impact, the contribution there are shown towards the primary school, GP surgery, and leisure use services. So in summary, it's considered that the benefits outweigh, there are no significant demonstrable harms that outweigh the benefits of the proposal. So therefore, in line with the tilt balance, planning permission should be granted, subject to the completion of a section 106 agreement and conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So we move to public speakers, and I will start with Christopher Davies, who is an objector. If you'd like to make your way to the microphone at the end there, and you will have 3 minutes.
Oh. Just like, yeah. I'll read my statement, if I may. Good afternoon, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm the owner of Old Pound Barn, and I've been for 23 years. Old Pound Barn is located directly below the proposed site, which you'll see on the photograph earlier. I have 3 specific objections to the plans put forward and strongly object to the proposal until they have been fully satisfied. There'd be no consultation with local residents at any stage, which to my mind tells its own story. Firstly, the lane proposed for all access, it's a lane, not a road, is simply inadequate and not fit for purpose. Its use on the basis proposed will not only cause unimaginable disruption, but real risk to life. It is simply not safe. Secondly, in direct contradiction to the proposal document, there is a significantly increased risk of flooding to my property and all of the 17 properties below the site. None of these properties have been considered in the report, only those above or adjacent to the site, i.e. on higher land. How can that possibly be right? Water runs downwards. Thirdly, the proposed use of a sewage treatment facility for new 22 properties, as opposed to a standard sewer, is of course testament to the impracticality of the management of phosphates for this site. I have previous experience of raw sewage and human excrement coming into my property from the site in question. It was disgusting. This required the involvement of the Environment Agency and extensive remedial work, and if the plans are allowed as proposed, will happen again. So in summary, I object to the based on 1, unsafe access to the site, 2, the absence of any flood mitigation measures for all the existing properties below the site, and 3, the absence of suitable sewage disposal and phosphate management. Unsafe, risky and damaging plans have been submitted because of the cost, difficulty and inconvenience to the proposer actually doing the right and proper course of action. Existing long-standing council taxpayers have rights too, a right to an acceptable level of risk on the roads, a right to flood prevention measures, and a right to sewage being acceptably dealt with. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, I invite David Green, who is a Portway resident and objector.
you, good afternoon. Do you hear me, everybody? Hopefully. If I switch it on? Yeah. Even better. I'm a resident at the hamlet of Portfield, not the village, with the town. It's a small cluster of 70 properties in a rural situation. I would pose the question, has any member of this committee any personal knowledge of the area? Have they been there? Do they know it? Have they seen any other photographs other than the few we've seen here? If you did know the property and you did visit it, you would know that it is a country lane off an A road. It's a narrow lane. It's a lane used by residents. It's a cut through, unfortunately, from the M5 occasionally. It's used by farm traffic and so forth. The report refers variously to Portfield Street. Well, it's not a street. It is a country lane. The report at 2.8 suggests there will be no adverse impacts. Well, as my colleague said, no one's been consulted about this at all. The impact will be to immediately double the size of the hamlet. And I've no doubt will lead to further development to the south, which is already subject to a planning application. And that's why, or one of the reasons why Curry Rival Parish Council talked about a 360 or 340% increase in the size of the Portfield. I've heard several references today to the area being relatively suburban. Well, I'm sorry, but if you look at Wikipedia, that refers to suburban as a largely residential district. In no way can Portfield be viewed as a residential district or anything like it. It's a small cluster of properties largely surrounded by fields, hedges used for sheep and so on and so forth. The access point is particularly irksome, I think. All the developer says is effectively it's more difficult to come off the A road because of the levels. Well, okay, so it's more difficult. That's not a reason with respect to use our lane because that's simple. That just throws everything on us. It enables the developer to just walk away from that problem. There's a 60-mile-an-hour speed limit on the lane at the moment, which is totally inappropriate anyway. I know that's not being dealt with today, but it is a serious factor, I would say, in relation to the access point, if nothing else.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time. Sign up. Could I please for Terry Mounter, also a resident and objector?
We have a change in the order. We changed that order.
You are sorry?
Mark Semper.
That's
No, we go through the objectives first, we will do it in this order. So I'd be looking for just Terry Mank would be the next person to speak.
Good afternoon, Terry Merchant, Curry Road Parish Council. I have to state, and it's been missed completely from this, that Portfield and Curry Road is not in Langford. Langford is adjacent to it, the next town, but it's in Curry Road. Curry Road has submitted their objections. I think you'll find it around page 10 of your documents or we submitted quite a detailed objection to this with reference to policy. And policy EQ2, EQ4, and the NPPF and all the SSDC policies, which is appropriate to this. Like most policies, depending where you're coming from, it can be used for both sides of the argument, for or against. What you have seen from the officers is, shall we say, an interpretation of a policy, based on the decision that they wish to reach, or this committee to reach. I won't go to the phosphate or the environmental assessment, access or drainage, because you've got plenty of information on that. It's biased towards an approval of this and a particular reports. Well, I've been involved in a lot of reports myself, and when you commission a report, you commission it to the people who will probably produce the result that you require. Sorry to be so cynical. Just touching on the highways element of it. The first picture you flashed up showed a section of road just outside of this, right outside the hedge, where there has been 3 fatalities. No mention is made of this, and it's an extremely dangerous piece of road. You know, past history would tend to prove on this. Going back to policy again, you have a 5-year land supply problem. Hasn't provided the land supply for the next 5 years, and this problem has been going on for, well, at least 20 years, I suppose. At each time you tackle that problem. In Curry Rival, in a very recent times, we have an addition of 192 houses on 10 new estates, treating the village to a more urban environment rather than rural. Other developments and sustainability, sewer, school, surgery, all part of the fact that this is it is not sustainable. That's it. Marcus will take up a lot of other points, but I would like to mention the section 106 monies.
Thank you very much for your time.
Cross Marcus to take that up.
The next speaker is actually Paul Nichols. Who is a local.
Thank you very much. My name is Paul Nichols. I live in Hazelnut Cottage in Portfield Lane. I'm one of the property owners in Portfield Lane, which lie directly downstream of the proposed development site. On behalf of myself and the other property owners, we wish to object on 3 grounds. 2 of these have already been covered, so I'm not going to go over those. They are the lack of communication to residents of Portfield, which we knew nothing about, and the inappropriate location of the proposed access to the site. The principal objection that I have is as follows. We have concerns over the proposal to discharge treated sewage and runoff surface water from this site directly into the culvert, which runs alongside 5 properties in Portfield Lane. All the properties in Portfield Lane have this culvert adjacent to them, which only at the moment accommodates surface runoff water. As property owners that are adjacent to this culvert, we have riparian ownership responsibilities, which extend to keeping this culvert clear, functioning, and ensuring it does not obstruct flow. See an example of how it is currently maintained. If the proposed site is connected to this culvert to discharge both surface water and treated sewerage from the 22, potentially 24 properties, this will increase the water flow and the risk of flooding. This culvert is already at times at overcapacity and cannot cope with the existing water levels. This sometimes has resulted in not only flooding of Portfield Lane, but also the garden of the property of Portfield Cottage. I'd also like to make clear that a number of residents of Portfield Lane are elderly, and their duty of riparian ownership and maintaining such a deep culvert is already inappropriate and difficult. That's with existing water flows. I witnessed this at first hand when my parents lived in my cottage, Hazelnut Cottage, and my mother suffered a fall when trying to clear this culvert. Not only does this illustrate how difficult it is to maintain a 4-foot deep culvert when it is relatively dry, but imagine what it would be like when the culvert is continuously drained with both sewerage, treatment and other waters. So in summary, I am objecting to the proposal.
Thank you very much. Can I just remind members that they will need to disregard any of the photographs they've just seen because they were not previously submitted to the case officer or to the.
I can supply them in due course, I wish.
Thank you very much for your time. And then move on to Marcus Henry. Marcus is the parish council representative for Cully Ryan.
Good afternoon, thank you. I'm Marcus Hembrow. I'm a resident of Portfield and my family have farmed at Portfield Farm for 120 years. I'm currently the chairman of Cully Ryan Parish Council, and before then was the land and planning director of 2 PLC house building companies, namely Taylor Window, Whitby and Barrett Redrow. Whatever matrix you choose to measure this by, this is a very poor application. It is in response to take advantage of Somerset's planning climate and the failure to address a 5-year land supply. The comments you have heard from the residents today are very genuine, very sincere, very real, and the concerns they have should be recognised and considered as part of this application. The main thrust of their concerns is a complete lack of consultation at every stage. We, as the parish council, contacted the applicant through their agent and invited them to attend the parish council meeting and the village meeting that was held to discuss this application. They refused to attend on both occasions. Since then, we've had no communication with them whatsoever. In fact, we as the residents only heard about this application going to committee on Thursday. The reason for this is that there is an anomaly in respect of the postcode. The postcode for the field that is being to be developed is outside the postcode of Hamilton Field, just cause confusion as far as notification goes. Because of the lack of consultation, the opportunity to improve this application and better it has been lost. However, if the consultation were to be considered, they would have realised that access from the A378 can be achieved. It is blatantly untrue to suggest you cannot facilitate an access to the main road. They have chosen not to pursue it because of cost reasons. Cost reasons are cited as to why there is no application and why there is no consultation. The direct sewer connectivity can be achieved. The need for PTP could be removed, and the land that's currently allocated for PTP could actually be used as a play space. At the moment, to facilitate any form of play area, children will have to travel either 1.4 miles in one direction or 2.3 miles in the other. There's no play space opportunity for residents of this hamlet.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Can I next invite Stephen Bainbridge, who is the agent, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Thank you for letting me speak today on behalf of the applicant. I'd also like to thank the planning officer for his robust, comprehensive and well-reasoned assessment of this application. The proposal will provide 22 new homes in a sustainable location that is within a safe, convenient walking, cycling and wheeling distance of Langport's town centre. Immediately south of the site is the A37A, which has a continuous pavement between Langport and Curry Rifle. South again, there are further dwellings and care homes. To the west is a disused care home site with a pending application that likely to be approved for residential redevelopment. Further west, away from Langport, are dwellings and recent permissions granted for new homes due to their sustainable locations relative to Langport's services. To the east, towards Langport, permission was granted for 8 dwellings. And to the north is Portway, a cluster of dwellings laid out in what I believe to be, as does the officer, a suburban form and layout. The application has been in almost 3 years. In that time, only Curry Rifle Parish Council and 9 households have maintained their objections to this scheme. Support has been given from Langport Town Council and Hewish Episcopal Parish Council, settlements that are more closely related to the site and which would ultimately provide the services for these new homes. There are now 0 objections on any technical grounds. Somerset South has a chronic undersupply of housing lands, and last month, Home Finder Somerset published that 13,255 households are registered in need of affordable housing. I agree, it is the time that this matter is addressed. In the planning balance, significant weight must be attributed to the 22 homes proposed and to the 35% of them that would be affordable. Other benefits include highway pedestrian enhancements, economic benefits through the construction phase and patronage of local services, and contributions to local infrastructure of over £184,000 towards Hewish Episcopal Primary School, over £13,000 to GP surgery in Langport, and over £65,000 towards local leisure and facilities to be enjoyed by all. The site is clearly in a sustainable location and there are no technical reasons for refusal. No harm has been identified that would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the significant benefits of the proposed development, that being the relevant test. As such, members, we respectfully suggest that you resolve to approve the application in line with the professional advice of the planning officer and all the technical consultees and the support of 2 of the 3 local town and parish councils. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, members. We move on to questions. Let's start with Councillor Ashton.
Yes, the proposed access is off the lane, but would there be a possibility, there's no mention of pedestrian access directly onto the footpath, which is on that side of the road, because the lane is very narrow and doesn't appear to have a footpath up to that road. Would it not be sensible to ask them to sort of break through to that footpath as part of this application condition there?
Yeah, I completely agree, and they have proposed doing so in this case. I can try and get the layout plan up again. Should probably do that again.
Sorry, if I missed it.
Okay, just my own's getting that back up. Councillor Pelling.
Thank you, Chair. Just a little bit of clarification. I can see that there is not necessarily confusion, but I can see that there's a bit of an issue. It clearly sits in Curry Rifle, but it looks to Langport. I see that a lot of the 106 agreements are going to Langport. I just wanted to clarify that the sill still go to Curry Rifle. Is that correct?
To be frank with you, I don't know where the sill would go. I think that us as planning officers, when we assess any proposal like this, I don't think it's our role to be working out where the sill money goes. I think we've got a separate sill team who are very careful with that. I know that I've seen some email exchanges between the sill team and the parishes, but to be frank, I don't recall the outcome of those, not where those monies would go. But I don't think that's something that we should be reconsidering this proposal. I think community infrastructure levy is kind of an additional layer on top of the planning proposal. Yeah.
Could we be happy that if we're content with the levy and condition, then this is something that can be taken up to the field team to ensure that it's going to affect them?
Yes, Chair. I think though it's indicative of the other problem that I think there are implications for the settlement hierarchy with this. I think that's perhaps more for the debate, but I do see that this as being linked to that particular argument. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Aaron, did you want to come back on the floor?
Yes, I don't think I can zoom in any further, but if you look on the eastern corner, there is well, I appreciate it's very small, but there is a pedestrian access in that corner. To remind members, the layout is indicative only, however, the accesses are definitive, so the vehicular access and the, oh yeah, thank you, good job there, yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's what I think, see that, yeah. So the vehicular access, which you can see clearly at the top, and the pedestrian one in the eastern corner are where the are depicted where the access would be. As I just remind, the layout itself is up for change. There's no matter stage if you're wanting to approve this outline application.
Thank you, Councillor Stanton.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm concerned about the sewage arrangements. This is, if you go on down the hill from Portfield, you get to the sewage works. So I'm slightly mystified as to why there needs to be a packaged treatment plant rather than direct connection down to the sewage works. Can you explain that, please?
Yes, it's a good point. The Environment Agency have a standard advice document about these issues, in which they have a calculation for developments where it's like the certain number of dwellings proposed times the distance to the nearest sewer. And then depending on the outcome of that calculation, whether the planning authority should be requiring a sewer connection instead of ECP. However, with the negotiator from exchanges with the Environment Agency and officers there, there is an exemption to that guidance, which is what the applicants proposed here, which is to have a water company adopt the infrastructure itself. So therefore the infrastructure itself effectively becomes a public sewer, even though obviously it isn't, but it's actually publicly, even though it's a private company. I know it's all very confusing, but I think the terminology in the legislation is very confusing. So the EA has advised us that we do not need to require a sewage connection in this case, and I think we should be deferring to that advice. I should remind members of paragraph 201 of the NPPF, which says that planning policies decisions should be focused on whether a development is acceptable use of land rather than the control of processes or emissions, which are subject to separate pollution control regimes, as I think they are in this case with that. So we spoke back to my original point of the presentation, where I think when we think about foul waste disposal methods, we're primarily considering the nutrient neutrality issue. We would never go into this level of detail usually with many other applications if it was in a non-phosphate area generally. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stanton.
Yeah, so assuming that there was a packaged treatment plant there, that the treated effluent from it runs into the ditch that we heard, culvert that we heard from a resident is maintained by area owners, which is very good to hear. Also repaired their owners don't bother, and that's a problem all over the country. Is that right? Will it add significantly to the volume of water going down that culvert? I mean, sufficient to make existing flooding even worse?
So it's correct to say that the treated effluent from the proposed dwellings would go into that culvert, treated by the PTP on site. The Environment Agency have said that a permit would be required for that PTP, and the Environment Agency generally have quite high standards for those sorts of permits. So I'm confident that and as I remind the paragraph about the pollution control measures, that the water entering that culvert would be clean and safe. On the point about whether that would be maintained, that culvert, and whether there could be flooding onto other people's properties, which has been raised by some residents, the Environment Agency, the Drainage Board, and the LFA have had extensive reviews, back and forth revisions to the FRA and meetings with the applicant about the proposed drainage scheme, and they're satisfied that it's feasible and safe. I think as a professional, as a planning officer, I'm not an expert in every field, and I defer to their expert advice with all those consultees, and I think I advise members to do the same on these very technical issues.
Thank you, Councillor Webb.
On the same issue, actually, I was just reading the Environmental Agency's Bartlett report, and their general advice is that there should be any connection to the main sewer, etc., And, but they say they've been advised that they cannot connect to to a sewer. And it is unfeasible, it says here, but that is from the applicant. Have we got it independently of, I've just heard about the sewage works downstream, I think, the right way to describe it. Is there a current sewage connection that could be taken to this site? Because the agency have said that it should be connected to the sewage system. That's what it says in their report. But they've been advised that it cannot be in this occasion, or it is unfeasible, and therefore we go into the needing a permit for the discharge into water courses. Have we got any information on where the nearest sewer is, really? Because it seems to me that there may be one close by.
Yes, there is one close by, and I think in physical terms, it would be possible to connect onto it, to my understanding. The Environment Agency, as I said, generally, the general guidance is to expect that applicants for large developments connect onto public sewers that are nearby where feasible. I think the phrase is where feasible, which obviously is subject to the term. In this case, when the permit gets applied for by the applicant for PTP, they would need to demonstrate to the EA why they haven't connected onto a public sewer. So that will be assessed also by the EA that way. I think the guidance by the EA is to avoid issues where an applicant think they don't have to, but then at the permit stage, actually the EA turns around and says we do. But in this case, there is an email exchange I've had with officers in the Environment Agency on this issue, and they've confirmed that due to the adoption of the PTP by Albion Water, they would not, in this case, insist on a sewage connection, a public sewer connection, which from memory, I think it's about 100 metres away. So I think hopefully that's answering the question.
So I'll come back, yes, sorry. When it said also in the Environment Agency, it says this will be connected to a current plant. I believe I'll have to read back and see if I can find it. But one of the reasons for saying that it would be possible is that it will be connected to a current system, our water system. Is that right? I read it somewhere.
I'll just get their comments up and then we can.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find it, Chair.
Yeah, whilst Erin's looking for the comments, are there any further questions? Councillor Kendall?
Just a quick one. Looking at your map of the site that proposed, is it all off-site parking? Off-street parking? They all got their own private driveways, or is it going to end up like one of these car parking down the Zoom flats all over the place?
My advice, members, would be that parking should not be considered in this application because that is a layout issue which would be considered at observed matter stage. That plan that you saw there is purely indicative, and they could, in theory, come up with a completely different layout and complete different parking measures. I've got the EA response in front of me. It was overtaken sentence in it that you wanted to.
I'm just trying to find out. Read it a minute ago. Can't find it.
Whilst Councillor Ware, like to Councillor Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. I suspect this might be a slightly different question as possibly one for 3 years. Which is, I'm presuming that we give no weight whatsoever to the text released for consultation in December in the UNPPF.
Councillor Ware, have you found your?
If I may, I mean,
partly to this.
it may not be partly, but there's a paragraph which says, at this stage, it is not clear whether the EA will be able to grant an environmental permit for a treatment plant, which the new development will rely upon. Without a viable sewage discharge mechanism, the LPA, as us, should consider whether the planning proposal is viable. So we're right to be debating this point.
Yeah, thank you.
So could I just ask a question at that point, that if that's in there, I'm guessing that anything we do would be subject to that being granted in the future, is that correct?
Yes, the dwellings couldn't be occupied until the permits being given by the environment agency. Then there's a clause in the proposed section 106 agreement restricting occupancy until BTP is installed working.
So, surely they couldn't be built without the sewage work being put in first. Yeah, that one there. They could, surely the sewage work and the groundwork has to be done before any occupation or house is built. So surely there was some, what was just said is putting the cart before the horse. And surely any agreement must be given by the environmental agency or the local planning authority about this matter before any building is even considered, surely.
I think if there's a situation where the environment agency reject a permit for whatever reason, the applicant would either have the choice of agreeing to whatever changes the environment agency have requested, or to seek a connection to the public sewer that's 80 metres away. If I just reiterate what I said, because I do appreciate it's confusing, and you've got that paragraph in front of you from the environment agency that says, you know, at this stage it's not clear, because I think the environment agency at that point in time when they wrote these comments weren't aware that Albion Water had adopted the PTP, and in that correspondence that I've had with them, they were satisfied that they wouldn't require a connection to the public sewer, and they would be acceptable in principle with the PTP. Obviously, the details of the PTP and the type and how that would be working the system would be agreed at the permit stage. So they can't obviously say at this stage, we would definitely give you a permit. They can only give an indication. I think sometimes the environment agency encourage applicants to submit their permit application alongside planning application. There's no requirement to do so, and the applicants, you know, obviously haven't done so in this case, but I think there's obviously going to be a certain uncertainty where you have to apply for something. I don't think that there's a significant enough issue here that would justify refusal against the tilted balance on the basis that they don't have a viable sewage discharge mechanism. I think they've demonstrated that. The nutrient neutrality officers and have no issue with it.
I'll let Councillor come back and I'm going to go Councillor Seaton.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just listening to this back and forth and thinking, this is an outline application.
Yeah.
The matter that's at concern here is foul water drainage, principally. Surely the trick is to create a condition which is pre-commencement for any construction works, because you've logically got, you know, the different sorts of drainage systems. There are some commonalities, but they're fundamentally different drainage, particularly if it's heading up in a different direction to a different sewer. So you have to actually establish the underground works before you can do the groundwork, the footings and so on. So logically, it must be pre-commencement for the outline matters, but it must be secured. You know, I hear your argument. They've demonstrated one way of doing it, but you need to resolve the ambiguity before you go to reserved matters. Is it possible to secure that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would make 2 points. First of all, condition 6 is a pre-commencement surface water drainage scheme condition. So they would need to agree those details, and primarily then if the drainage board would review that and do that. In regard to the permit, I think what you're suggesting is that we require that they receive the permit before they commence development. My view would be that would be an unreasonable condition, and it's not something we routinely put on these types of developments. Sorry if I misunderstood your question.
I'm afraid I completely misunderstood the point. The principle of going to a packet treatment works and the principle of going to a foul water sewer, they're different designs, completely different, and they're underground underneath the buildings. So you can't start designing your building floor levels, for example, until you've actually sorted out which of the two directions you're going down. You have a potential way forward with packet treatment works which might be permitted, and a recommendation from the relevant authority that they would prefer it to go to a sewer. unless I've misunderstood it. So I think you're trying to grab the answer you can get to when actually you could happily park this down in the conditions. So I think probably park this in the conditions as a, it's either this or this, and you'll sort out the fire water drainage before submitting the outline.
Can I just ask a question before we go down this road any further? We're looking at this application, this is something that the applicant needs to resolve. And if they start building something and then they decide that they can't get that to them and they need to change what's underneath, that's at their risk. That's not really for us to decide. So I am a bit concerned that we're going down a bit of a road here, but I'll let Evan come back in.
Yes, I'd agree with that. I think the applicant's clear here that their proposal is the PTP and they've submitted, referring to their NAMs and shadow bank terrain, the flood risk assessment drainage documents that have a lot of detail about what that would look like. There's conditions that will require further details in the future. In my view, there's no serious risk of that being assessed as unsuitable by the Environment Agency based on the information we have, and therefore we shouldn't. I don't think it would be a reasonable grounds for refusal of this application to say that there isn't. We don't have confidence that there's a suitable method of foul waste disposal in this case. I think the applicant has demonstrated that sufficiently, in my view.
Thank you. I'm going to give it a to Stanton and then I'm going to open the debate.
Okay, I want to ask a question on a completely different subject, which is that if you look at page 56, paragraph 4.1, we're told that there are two other relevant proposals. The reason I was followed by the Vice Councillor Chair just before we started dealing with this was that he tried to send me an email this morning, which I hadn't received because he misaddressed it, which was drawing attention to this issue, which is that there's an application waiting determination 2102785 for 24 dwellings on an adjacent site, and he was raising the question whether.
I'm going to pause you there a second because we can't take into consideration another application. We can only make a decision on what we've got in front of us.
That was what I wanted to ask, Chair. You've just answered the question. We cannot take into account anything to do with that other application, which has been unresolved for 5 years. I don't know why.
I'm going to go, I missed Councillor Curley, I'm going to go to Councillor Curley and then I am going to open the debate.
Thank you, Chair. So I did hear a few objections about highways, issues and safety. I have to say that highways haven't objected, but it did spark my interest that somebody said there was a 60-mile-an-hour road there. Are there any plans, or is it within our ability to lower the speed limit directly outside? Thank you.
In short, not as part of this planning application. There's a separate procedure for lowering speed limits that the Highway Authority control, and they will consider that on a case by case basis, or whether they review that regularly, I don't know. But I don't know if there's a highway officer on the other isn't, unfortunately. But yeah, they haven't objected to the proposal, and they confirmed as well that the information they've requested as part of that comment was meant for the reserve matters and discharge condition stages, not determination of the application. I did want to just rate, I think I'll leave that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to open the debate and I'm going to start with Councillor Stanton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On that point that Councillor Curley just raised, I mean, I know this area very well. I'm one of the two members representing Curry Rydal Lane. And if you look at the parish boundaries, this is only just within Curry Rydal parish. It is much more naturally connected to Langley. And as it happens, your Episcopi parish across the road. The junction I know very well because I use that road a lot. You know, I'm on the drainage boards and so on. So I actually come up and down that lane and use that junction onto the main road. Curiously, I've recently also used the junction across the road, which is the junction up to Hurds Hill, which some of you will know is where Walter Badger, the famous personality, second editor of The Economist in the middle of the 19th century, lived. There's recently been a book launched about him, which is what I was up there for a couple of times. It's a tricky area for driving because it's true factually that as you come up that lane, which is a hill upwards from the levels up to the main road, that's a 60-mile-an-hour limit. You have to have a very fast accelerating car to be able to do 60 miles an hour up or down that hill. But you could technically arrive at that junction and suddenly slam your brakes on, having been just doing 60 as you passed the entrance to Portfield. The main road, it's just at the point, and I think the planning officer says this in his statement, it's just at the point where the 30-mile-an-hour limit becomes a 40-mile-an-hour. So that's right by the junction. So, you know, you would think that this really, particularly with 2 more developments of 24 plus 22 houses potentially there, you'd think it needs a lower speed limit. But as we've been told, that's a separate issue. I'm very much in 2 minds about this application. We do need more housing. Langport has grown. You'll know that Langport and Jewish Episcopal Parish is emerging and approved by the Constitutional Governance Committee. It hasn't come to us at full council yet, but I'm assuming it'll be approved. And that's because Langport is constrained. You know, it's got a tight boundary and it provides all the facilities, not quite all, because the schools are actually, as was pointed out, in Curry Rival, but also in Jewish Episcopal. There isn't a school in Langport. But the shops are there, the Riverside Walk is there, Tesco supermarket is there, and so on. So, if it's right to think about any developments around the perimeter of Langport, looking to Langport for their services. So, I'm really very torn as to what to think about this. So I'm going to wait and hear the rest of the debate.
Thank you. Would you like to call? STB?
Yeah, I'm also conflicted for different reasons. I agree that there should have been some consideration of play. I can sort of understand why there hasn't been. I also foresee that being difficult in the future, being on the parish boundary. You know, which parish will try to solve that problem. I do think it's nearer to that Tesco's than my house is to Asda. That's my metric, you know, I mean, it looks like it's way out of the village, but it's 800 metres to the entrance to the car park. So, because I've just measured it. So I'm reasonably happy. I do think it would be more elegant if we kept pressing for the right sewage solution, but I would set the point that it's been demonstrated to be feasible. I am also quite frustrated that it's not got great pedestrian connections, but then again, it's a small town, and this is the extension on the edge of the small town. So many comments have been made about the quality of the application. Now they just about scrapes over the line for me. I'm mindful of our duties, put it that way. So I feel like I can't find a way of not supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just mindful of a colleague of ours that passed away a couple of years ago, Dean Ruddle, who would have had lots to say about this and actually lived up at Hurst Hill himself for a period of time, yeah, in that lovely house. I would really quite like his counsel on this. I think I'm like everybody else split. I think that the pedestrian sustainability is good, the sustainability to Langport is great. But for me, there are real implications for the Southern hierarchy and the blurring of distinct communities. And for me, that is a concern. Still on the fence for this. I'm going to listen to what everyone else says, but I'm a little bit undecided at the moment, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ashton.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about the parish town council boundaries. I see as towns expand, it's quite common to find developments actually in a rural parish, which actually should be really associated. And that's an issue for the boundary commission, really, and the agreement between the parishes. The footpath, as far as I remember it, is actually quite well set back from the road. There's a footpath and then there's a green green area. So I think that's a lot better than quite a lot of footpaths that we've actually considered recently. It's not a huge distance from the centre of Langport. So I'm veering towards accepting this particular application.
Thank you very much. Councillor Webb?
Yes, thank you. My point is very well gathered is to do with the drainage and particularly the valve drainage. And I noticed there's a condition of on here which is to the rainwater type drainage. But then the only mention of valve drainage are for information or for information. Now, I find that somewhat unusual. I would have thought that the valve drainage system part of this should have been a condition, and I'm surprised it isn't. It's informative at the moment, and as I may have gathered, I'm particularly perturbed about the treatment of the valve treatment and the effect it was going to have on the village or the settlement rather below. And I don't think that we have sufficient proper information to be able to say that will be done correctly. It seems to be left in the hands of the agent at the moment with and asking for a permit at some stage from the agency. As to the actual settlement of the new buildings, I think I agree that we really haven't any grounds to object to that part of the application. We've heard about the 5-year land supply back of it, and this is in some ways a natural development which one unfortunately has been going on for centuries actually along our river developments of this sort are the way that towns, villages and areas have developed for centuries. So I'm not so perturbed about that, but I have great concern about flooding and foul water system and the way it's in this report. I, at the moment, don't think I agree with it, Paul, but I don't think that it's properly done.
Thank you very much. Councillor Page.
Thank you, Chair. The people objecting to it, I think, have made some very good points regarding concerns about flooding and sewerage and traffic problems. On the other hand, the planning officer has indicated how those are going to be overcome. Like a lot of other councillors, I'm on a sort of knife edge regarding this. We do more homes, and these do fit into a pattern linked to Langport, and it does seem geographically it's much closer to Langport than it is to Curry Rydal. I think a deciding factor probably is the fact that both Langport Parish Council and Hewish Episcopi Parish Council, which are going to be combined, support it. And that for me is quite an important factor, that those local councillors have given it their support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Messenger.
I have concern over the people that have to look after the ditch and that, and you've got a septic tank there. I don't know if anyone watched the last one on Channel 4, it's a dirty job about the sewers coming into contact with people. Well, if these people in that settlement are expected to clean that ditch, what happens if the tanks overflow into the ditches? Aren't we putting the residents at some sort of risk there?
I'm going to go to Councillor Patrick.
Thank you, Chair. I have some concerns about this one. I've listened to the debate very carefully, but balance, I don't believe there are any technical reasons that we can, any policy reasons that we can turn this down. On that basis, I think, well, I'll give a bit more of a background. So Albion Water has come up on my radar recently. There was an application of iPatch The applicant had to get a permit, which was refused. And so they had to come back with section 73 to come up with a different solution for phosphate. That reassures me actually that if, in this case, the EA turns around and says you can't connect, they don't permit this connection. But, I am reassured that it won't go ahead until it's all done properly. So, on that basis, and given no objections from any of the secondary consultees, after plenty of toing and froing, I think I'd like to propose we approve this in line with the author's recommendations.
Okay. Councillor Ashton, quickly and then.
It's quick. I was of the understanding that your foul drainage and your surface water drainage you kept separate anyway, and in reserve matters there would be an appropriate subs, etc., to deal with the fluvial issues and things like that. So we're not talking about a sudden burst of foul drainage, because that's a separate system through the package treatment plant, and therefore, but really, then in the case of flooding, that's a suds issue, but in case of foul water, it's a fairly constant flow. So I don't see that we're going to get a sudden flood of foul water down a ditch, because the two systems nowadays are kept completely separate, unless I've got this completely wrong.
We've got a proposal on the table. I'm just going to ask Eric if he'll quickly, briefly answer that, confirm that point for us, and then I'm going to be looking back to the members.
So there'd be foul waste pipes from the dwellings to the PTP on site, which would then be treated, and then from the PTP would then become part of the surface water drainage system, and it would be treated as clean, treated water that would then be put into root sources. I just want to make two other clarifications. So add water to someone's ditch or culvert, my understanding is you need land drainage consent or you need their permission. So that would be enough. So it wouldn't just be as if the applicant could just be free to start pouring, any surface water into anyone else's ditch and expect them to look after it, that kind of thing. Nor would they be obviously putting untreated effluent in those areas. And I think the only circumstance in which that could happen is if the PTP failed for some reason, which would obviously be a maintenance issue. And I don't think that would be really a planning consideration.
Okay, thank you. I'll come back to Oliver, who made the proposal.
Thank you, Aaron. That's exactly the point I was driving at, possibly badly, is that the application, it's not relevant to this, I know, well it is, but I'm not going to get into details. Apart from to say that the PTPs, the advertisements are, you can drink from them. It's not raw sewage. And in the case that I referred to in my patch board, the connection was to a culvert, and they had to get a license, which was refused. So they had to come up with an alternative solution. That's a risk that the applicant is taking. It's not something we can govern. I think what Eric said earlier is true in the sense that the applicant has demonstrated they can deal with surface water, they can deal with sewage effluent. And I think our statutory consultees, our technical consultees have agreed with that. Doesn't give us much room to oppose it. Especially, I think we have to agree with those conclusions. Therefore, I reiterate my proposal, which I think at this stage we have debated and we have nowhere else to go with this, though. I will to approve this.
Thank you very much. We've had a proposal. Councillor Ashton and then Councillor Stanton.
I'd like to second that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm trying to get myself deconflicted on this. I think I'm right in saying that Curry Rydal Parish Council supported the application for 24 houses at the very now.
Councillor Stanton, this is
I think that's
Councillor Stanton.
So I'm slightly mystified as why there's not support for these 22. I mean, I am unhappy about the difficult corporate junction with some dangers. I didn't know there'd been 3 fatal accidents there. I'd like to know exactly where they happened. I suspect the Herds Hill entrance is more the danger point than the lane. Very good case put by a resident about keeping the culvert clear and so on. But Councillor Page and Councillor Patrick have really made the key points. There is support from 2 other parishes. I think if we refused this and it went to appeal, I'm sure an inspector would approve it. So I think we should approve.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a proposal and a second there. Can I have a show of hands? All of those in favour of said proposal?
9.
Okay, against? You? And any abstentions? No. So that proposal is carried. Thank you very much. Let's move on to our last application of the session, which is the planning application at the line at Hayes Road in London, from Somerton. It's good. Second thoughts, how we come in, top presentation on the screen.
I'm wondering, given the step a few times, whether I see it.
It's part of your choice. Okay. Yeah, still halfway through that, yeah.
Go to knowledge. Knowledge merit. That's bad.
Good afternoon, members. This is an application for the erection of a self-built dwelling and associated buildings at Hayes Road in Northern London. So just a screenshot of the map. So the site is to the north of Hayes Road. For those familiar with Northern London, the cricket ground is just to the east. And as you'll see, there are a few properties to the south. A zoomed in map. Onto some satellite imagery, so just a zoomed in map again. And again, a zoomed out map, note there is some sporadic development to the south and the north. Okay, and then on to the site photos. So this is me just walking down Hayes Lane, showing the nature of the highway. And then further down Hayes Road with the development site on the right. Here I'm stood at the entrance to the site, looking further down Hayes Road towards some other residential dwellings. And then looking back up towards the village. So now I'm stood within the site on the southeastern corner, approximate location of the dwelling. And here I am in the northeastern portion of the site, looking towards the farm buildings beyond to the east. And then again, so I'm stood centrally within the site and looking towards properties along Hayes Road to the west. Now the two dwellings, you can see the gables have been constructed approximately 5 years ago. And then I'm stood centrally within the site, looking north towards the surrounding landscape. And then looking west, the existing boundary treatment. And again, looking towards the existing built form opposite the site. And then looking back at the photos. Stood opposite the site, looking towards the site. And then looking back down towards Hayes Road, showing the sort of the general highway condition. And goes up to site access. Just a picture of the sort of the roadside ditch, obviously quite overgrown, but I visited last week after a period of heavy rainfall, and it was empty, as you can see. And again, looking the other side. So now onto some site plans. So you'll note from the plans, it is a sizable dwelling. There's no getting around that. And there are sort of large outbuildings. Close up, so whilst the whole site is within the applicant's ownership, I mean, the front portion of the site would be residential, with the rear remaining agricultural use. And again, there's sort of a close up site followed now. Onto some plans of the dwelling, so here you go, the ground floor plans. So you'll note sort of the protrusion at the front would be a sort of a self-contained annex. And there you go, so the dwelling, four bedrooms were included in that self-contained annex. So onto some elevations. Excuse me. So the proposal to see a mix of stone, timber and facing brick with dormer windows, giving the illusion of a 1.5 story. Obviously it's 2 story, but give that illusion. And then onto just the general proposed elevation. So you'll note it's a 2-story dwelling with a smaller side extension and the detached annex. So you've got a sizable garage proposed. Whilst large, this has been justified in our opinion, and it's used as a personalised garage. Would be conditioned accordingly. The materials would be timber clad. And again, so upstairs is that garage. So, well, 6-bay garage on the bottom with the gym and on this upstairs again. We're content with this, and this use can be conditioned accordingly. And then, as well as that, there is this sort of agricultural barn building, which will enable you put the land behind to the rear. It's considered this agrarian scale design and raises no issues. And then just finally, sort of elevations of the site. So I think it's fair to say there has been quite significant local objection. The key concerns that have been outlined in my report and sort of on the screen in front of you there. The key ones are flooding, the design, and sort of the siting to the north of Thames Road, which is currently undeveloped. In terms of flood risk, no building works are actually proposed within flood zone 1. Sorry, ignore that. All building works are proposed within flood zone 1 and are outside of any surface water flooding area. As such, it is our view that it would be unreasonable to object on such basis. I visited the site, like I said, last week after a period of heavy rain, and whilst the site was wet, it wasn't particularly flooded, in my view. And with regards to the siting of the development, whilst there is limited development on the northern side of Hayes Road at the minute, there are other sporadic developments up Ham Lane, including the village school and other recent developments. I mean, you've also got that sort of sizable farm complex to the rear. And obviously there are concerns about sort of the precedent set by allowing development here. However, I don't think it would be unreasonable to say that if the neighbouring fields came forward, even without this application, that we would, as a planning authority, we would have any concern. And then just some sort of site photos of the development that has been completed on the northern side of Ham Lane. Got quite a few dwellings there, as well as the village hall. So to conclude, there is support in principle for the proposal given the proximity to services. Copland London is an SS2 settlement. You've got the school, you've got the pub, you've got the village hall, which are all within walking distance of the site. There are no foreseen highway impacts with the development, and all the matters or issues can be appropriately controlled by condition. The relevant ecology surveys have been undertaken and do not raise any adverse concerns. And such recommendations, including such report, will be conditioned accordingly. As a self-built dwelling, it is exempt from the requirement to provide BNG,
subject to a legal agreement, and phosphates have been addressed appropriately. With regards to the design and scale of the proposal, notwithstanding the objections, Officers consider it to be acceptable in the setting and did not consider that it will demonstrable harm to the local landscape. As such, it's our view that the process is acceptable and it's recommended for approval subject to conditions and the legal agreements for the self-build.
Thank you very much. Question? My apologies, I'm skipping way ahead now. I was thinking to myself, why is everyone staring at me? That'll be why. Okay, so we'll start with the public questions, and we'll start with Joe Fryer from Planning Practice.
Chair, I'm just going to share some slides. This.
Can I just check if this material has been previously submitted?
Back to your slides.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, councillors. In describing the tilted balance, the NPPF instructs the decision maker to secure well-designed places. It states, and I quote, "Planning decisions should ensure that developments add to the overall quality of the area, are visually attractive as a result of good architecture, layout and appropriate landscaping. They should be sympathetic to local character, history and setting. Development that is not well designed should be refused." These are the actual considerations laid out in the NPPF to be considered when weighing the balance. The application site is in the Somerset Levels and Moors National Character Area. I want to show you these photos whilst I quote from Natural England. It is a flat landscape with pollard trees, ditches, flood banks and expanses of winter floodwater. Settlement is often sparse and historically influenced by the avoidance of flood risk. There are extensive views without human development or occupation. These descriptions absolutely ring true for the application site. Located on the village fringe, development exists only on the south side of Hayes Road, where ground levels are higher, distinct from the lowland floodplain to the north. Can I ask that my slides are moving with what I'm saying? Thank you. The application proposal directly contradicts this form. It would be the only residential development to the north of Hayes Lane, introducing domestic form and appearance to an overtly agricultural scene. In total contrast to the existing modest bungalows and traditional cottages, it is a very large dwelling of 2 stories, a 23-metre long garage, a barn and a 1.5 acre garden. This is totally incongruous on the village fringe. And a slide specifically, slide 6, I think it's at the next one.
Well, sorry,
That's right. But a slide, I think it's the next one. There. This slide enables an appreciation of the excessive bulk proposed compared to the existing cottage there on the left-hand side. The development would occupy the whole of the field width, completely at odds with the more modest plot widths and predominantly single-storey forms locally. We have the next one, please. Thank you. The outline there in red of the application site. Compton Dundon is a location where the principle of development is acceptable, but the critical point is that it is not at any cost. The NPPF clearly and decisively provides the means to resist development that is, and I quote, "not sympathetic to local character and history, not sympathetic to landscape setting." There is absolutely no obligation to approve all development that is sustainably located. The bar is higher than that. Somerset deserves better than that, and I urge you to refuse planning permission for the reasons here given.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
My next call, Fran Button. Who's the local resident?
Good afternoon, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Fran Button. I live opposite the proposed development, and I'm objecting to this application on the grounds of flood risk and non-compliance with NPPF. Somerset has once again been in the headlines following severe flooding across the county, affecting numerous homes. The council declared a climate emergency in 2019, committing the authority to take full account of long-term climate risk in all planning decisions. Approving a development where flood risk information is incomplete would run counter to that commitment. Although the site is technically in flood zone 1, it is bordered on 3 sides by flood zones 2 and at the back by 3, and it is surrounded by reams on 4 sides. It is classic Somerset levels pasture land, flat, low-lying and about 30 feet above sea level. From the plans, it even appears possible that parts of the garage may be heading into flood zone 2. NPPF 181 states that when determining any planning applications, local planning authorities should ensure that flood risk is not increased elsewhere. Where appropriate, applications should be supported by a site-specific flood risk assessment. Footnote 63 not only requires a flood risk assessment for all developments in flood zones 2 and 3, but also in flood zones 1 where certain of the following conditions apply. Sites of a hectare or more, land which has been identified by the Environment Agency as having critical drainage problems, land identified in the strategic flood risk assessment as being at a risk of increased flood in future, or land that may be subject to other sources of flooding, whereas development will introduce a more vulnerable use, as is the case, I believe, here. The site appears to meet several of these criteria, and yet the flood risk assessment is missing, and I would question if the EA have been consulted. The development includes a large dwelling, annex, garage block, and extensive barge servicing on a field known to hold water. This will inevitably alter runoff patterns, and without a flood risk assessment, we cannot be confident this will not increase flood risk to neighbouring homes in the village. The NPPF requires development to be safe for its lifetime and not to increase flood risk elsewhere. Without a flood risk assessment, the authority cannot demonstrate that the development will meet these requirements. Sustainable development is not just about pubs, post offices and transport in a village. It's about protecting existing residents from avoidable harm. One new house should not compromise the safety of many long-established homes. For these reasons, I respectfully ask the committee to refuse this application until a full site-specific flood risk assessment and any required sequential or exception tests are provided. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Move on to James Chapman, who is a Somerset Tree strategist. Sorry.
Good afternoon, councillors, and thank you for the introduction. As the Somerset Tree strategist, I'm constantly looking for new sites to plant trees, and this is one of the sites where I would absolutely not recommend that at all. And I think the reasons I wouldn't recommend it, the exact reasons that I would strongly oppose any sort of building on it. One of the reasons this is a priority habitat. It's a priority habitat for all sorts of different threatened species. I won't go through them now, but they include great crested newts, wading birds, skipper butterflies. The list is enormous. It's actually, the whole of the site is actually on deep peat soil. Natural England have described it as a national character area. It's also an environmentally sensitive area, but also, I think most relevantly, it's now proposed by Natural England as a Ramsar site. Somerset Council describe this as a site of immense international importance. It's one of the richest and most important lowland wet landscapes in the UK. We have, as a council, we have a net zero policy. I think the maintenance and conservation of this landscape is absolutely essential if we're going to address this policy. The Planning and Infrastructure Act of 2025 will place Ramsar as some of the most statutory, on the same statutory footing as European SVAs, some special protected areas. And I quote, development should only proceed if there is no alternative, also for imperative reasons of overriding public interest. Those don't exist. We're a team. I think there's a representative from every single house on Hayes Edge here today. And I think that is just just an example of the overwhelming public support that opposes this proposal rather than in favour of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we go to Jackie Sugden.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Jackie Sugden, resident of Compton, London. Having studied the proposal, there is no doubt it is entirely inappropriate for this rural location. Its scale, size and overall impact are completely out of keeping with the character of the open area to the north of Hayes Road. What is being put forward is not a small or sympathetic addition. It's a development that will fundamentally alter the landscape. It will destroy the openness and tranquility that define this part of the parish and the wider levels. I want to emphasise the strength of local feeling. At the parish council meeting, 17 residents attended. This is a remarkable turnout for such a small community. The parish council voted unanimously to object, and 12 individual objections have also been submitted. To put this into perspective, Hayes Road, where the development is proposed, has only around 20 houses. When almost the entire road and a significant proportion of the wider parish feel compelled to object, it clearly demonstrates the depth of concern. There are 2 points I would like to stress. Firstly, the environmental concerns here are serious. The ecological assessments that have been provided appear superficial, fail to demonstrate a proper understanding of the habitats at risk. Wildlife corridors will be disrupted, and the long-term impact on biodiversity has not been properly addressed. My second point, perhaps the most pressing of all, is flooding. We all know the Somerset levels are among the most flood-prone landscapes in the country. We see flooded fields to the north of Hayes Road throughout the winter. Recent years have shown how quickly the levels can become overwhelmed. This has devastating consequences for homes, farmland and infrastructure. Any development that increases surface water runoff or reduces natural drainage is a direct threat. This application does not provide convincing evidence that it will not directly worsen the flooding. In summary, this proposal conflicts with multiple planning policies, offers no meaningful public benefit, and carries significant risks to the character, safety and environmental stability of our community. For these reasons, and particularly the environmental shortcomings, the overwhelming local opposition and the real concerns about flooding on the Somerset levels, I strongly urge the committee to refuse its application.
Thank you. Next, we move to Diane Churches, who is from Compton London Parish Council.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think I'm going to repeat some of the things that's been said, but this is fine. At our September meeting, the parish council resolved to reject this application. The reasons given: the site is within Natural England National Character Area of Somerset, Level and Moors. The north side of Hayes Road has not been developed, and the road forms natural boundary. Breaking this line to build on the north side of the road would harm the natural landscape of the area and would also set a precedent for future development. The site is known to flood. The scale of the development is extensively large, and the development will create a light pollution in the designated dark area. 17 members of the public attended this meeting and expressed their concerns about development of the site. It's a local, well-known fact that fields on the north side of Hayes Lane and those surrounding the proposed site are often very sodden. A part of the field of the proposed site is in flood zones 2 and 3, which is considered unsuitable for development. I note the planning officer is drawing similarities with other properties in the centre of the village and the village hall in Ham Lane. There is no comparison. The characteristics of these parts of the village are completely different to that in Hayes Road. The north side of Hayes Road has no dwellings, just a few field shelters and sheds. The road lineage is on the edge of the Somerset Level and Moors, with interactive views and landscape of the levels, the Walton Hill and the Walton Windmill in the distance. It's very peaceful and many poor people walk along there. It's very much a part of Compton Dungeon's history. It's unique and should be preserved for future generations to enjoy. The parish council recognise that the village is suitable for a limited amount of development, but is keen to promote development that is in keeping and in character. This proposed development is neither. I'd just like to add as well that there is no village school in Compton Dungan. I've not been for several years. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next we move to Peter Ewing, who is the applicant.
Chairman, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. My name is Peter Ewing, I'm the applicant. I stand to sit here today before you, not as a developer, not as an investor, and certainly not as a millionaire, but as a husband, father, and son-in-law trying to build a family home. I spent my career working in regulated manufacturing, first in the food industry, and now medical care devices. My wife in the NHS Cancer Services across Taunton and Yeovil hospitals. We are working people who serve our communities and have spent our lives in the area. We're simply trying to create a multi-generational home where 3 generations can live together. So we can care for my wife's parents in their 80s and ill health. So we can care for my own parents following them and eventually ourselves with our own children. I will also be personally undertaking a lot of the work of this bill. Due to a lack of suitable affordable existing properties in the area, we've been on the self-build register for over 5 years and able to find a suitable plot in an area we've lived all of our lives. So in 2024, we invested our entire life savings in this land at the planning process. From the very beginning, even before purchase, we engaged locally with planning officers and residents. We undertook a pre-planning inquiry, a pre-planning application, and now a full planning application. The designs and requirements shown from the outset have not changed through this process and have been supported at each stage by planning officers. Every required professional survey has been carried out and more. We appointed a respected local architect who has designed and delivered 6 homes within the village, including 3 direct opposite our land in recent years, all built in the gardens of local residents who showed overwhelming support in the exact same location. It is a highly energy efficient design with solar panels in the garage that will cover twice the annual usage requirement of light heating power for both the house and annex. Air source heat pumps and highly insulated civil construction. We designed our home to reflect the village character of a 1.5-story traditional style blue light house. Siting is offset to carefully preserve views and obstruct none of them, and make use of the 30-foot high mature trees and established hedgerows and natural screening, minimising any visual impact to the landscape. This is not a speculative development. We're not looking for 10 houses, we're looking for 1. We're retaining over 60% of the land for agricultural use and a voluntary enhancing biodiversity, having carried out the BMG survey at our own costs, even though self-build were exempt. The proposal has consistently been supported throughout by the department and professional planning officers. It meets policy. It meets the criteria. On tilted balance, our proposal would free up 2 existing homes back into the market, helping the national housing shortage crisis. It supports the needs of the 5-year housing land supply shortage and the lack of self-build availability. It reduces pressure on state services by the care we can offer for our family and the generations to come. Perhaps it's not about profit or politics, it's about family, responsibility and long-term stewardship. And I respectfully ask you all to support and approve the application. And I thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Can I just ask you to press the button on the front just to turn the mic? Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, we'll open up to questions from members. Councillor Stanton.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of thoughts and fact check. Is this a Ramsar site? How far is it from a Ramsar site? Does it need a flood risk assessment? And I'd love to ask, although I'm not permitted to, why not the applicant is there with all this opposition?
We'll take the first two.
So the Ramsar site is the Somerset Levels moors, which it's part of, but I don't have the map to hand. But it's the same Somerset Levels moors Ramsar site we look at when we're looking at phosphates. While I'm talking about Somerset Levels and moors, obviously a lot of the objection does mention that it's in the national character area. I would remind members that the whole of England is a national character area, and every application we pass would fit it within a national character area, including the houses directly opposite that we recently approved. And the other question was about the flood zone. The flood zone, sorry. So I don't believe there's any development in any that's not a flood zone 1. EA have not been consulted as one of the objections raised because it doesn't meet their threshold. They set us a threshold when they want to be consulted, and when we consult when it doesn't meet it, they don't reply. The Internal Drainage Board have been consulted to deal with local drainage, and they've raised no objection to a number of conditions regarding that.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Webb.
Yes, two if I may. The first one is, can the planning officer or land officer remind me, I recall in our local plan, there was a section on assisting self-build. I can't remember exactly what it said, and I think it was also in the NPP about self-build. Can you just remind us what it is exactly? Thank you.
In the South Somerset local plan policy, there is no specific self-build.
Oh, isn't it? Oh, right.
Yeah. I haven't assessed this as a self-build as such, because in my view, it's had it been a commercial development, if you like, I would still be making the same recommendation. The self-build nature in my mind does not outweigh. I'm not leaning on the self-build nature to override any harm as such.
Okay. So one more. Thanks, Jim. The other one is, although the north side is not overbuilt, did I see a farm or build large buildings to the west? Would it have been? And also, how far are the buildings to the east on the north side, which you pointed out, I think?
Let me just get my map up again. So as you can see on that slide, there's a farm and a couple of dwellings to the northeast.
Yeah.
And then if you sort of head east, within 400 metres, you'd sort of find the village hall.
They're on.
So yeah, so that's the more oblong orange shape is sort of the village hall and recent development of, I think it's 6 or 7 houses.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's sort of within 400 metres of the site.
And that's on the north side,
That's on the north side of Ham Lane, yes.
and the farm is on the other side, about the same distance away, is it? I'm sorry in the distance on the photographs, don't worry.
And then the farm is, so if you can see that white square, which I've got,
Yes.
that's the application site. So the farm is 150 metres at most to the northeast.
Thank you, Jeff, thank you. Interesting.
Okay, any further questions? Yeah, hang on.
Thank you, Chair. On page 113, just to start a bit confused by the statement, an ecological survey has been carried out, full stop. Next thing it says is the council ecologist has been consulted, but no formal one has been provided.
Yeah, the council ecologist has not reviewed the information, however, it's a professional document, I've reviewed it and I'm quite satisfied that conditioning the recommendations and mitigations included within that survey, there will be no impact on protected species.
I just want to ask, why did the ecologist didn't respond to the initial request when that's his job?
Sometimes consultants don't come back in a timely manner.
Okay, any further questions? I will move this into the debate. Okay, if you would like to start debate, Councillor Curley.
Thank you, Chair. This has been a difficult one from the outset, and I think that this is going to rest on our interpretation of the tilted balance. I think the road for me is a natural demarcation between the village and the levels. And I think the levels there in particular are a heritage landscape. And I think if you know that area at all, you will know they are quite a special area. I think that we've talked about the development on the north side of the road a little bit further in. I would argue that that is really contained within the village proper, not on the outskirts like this one. I would also argue that the farm is actually serving the levels themselves. So actually that is a fit place for the farm to be. So the precedent for me is the main concern. I think within this particular environment, traditionally houses have nestled against the hills, away from protected area and the levels. And I think this begins to encroach on that natural demarcation, on that heritage landscape. So the precedence is my main concern. However, I have just heard from the officer that any development along that field would be considered to be correct in planning terms anyway. So I'm a little bit worried that there perhaps isn't the precedent that I first thought being set here. So I think really the question of the committee is going to be, do the benefits outweigh the harm? And I think we can quite clearly see that there is harm to the natural environment. We are used to making this judgment in terms of the 5-year land supply. So we quite often take the harm and we balance it against the benefit of having some more houses. I think my question for the committee, and I think the question we all have to wrestle with, is one house enough benefit to outweigh the clear harm that I think that it does? And I think that really is the question for the committee today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I am sympathetic to the applicant who obviously wants to build a family home for a multi-generational group. But on the other hand, it's always about the right house in the right area. And having listened to all the people who've made their voices heard, both supporting and objecting, I do really feel that this is an inappropriate proposed development due to the size of the property, which I think is out of keeping with the vernacular architecture in Compton Dundon. Also, as my colleague Councillor Curley has said, in terms of it's encroaching onto the natural landscape of the levels. It's not in an area where there are other houses. It's quite away from other developments, and those on the other side fit into the landscape and have been there for several hundred years in some cases. I think Joe, the consultant, made some very good points objecting to it, and I'm certainly minded not to support this application. Thank you. And I'm a local divisional councillor for Somerset, which includes Compton Dundon. Thank you.
Okay, councillor Wang.
Thank you, Chair. Once again, we come to the our committee problem of if we are going to refuse this, we have to find grounds. And frankly, the officer's report is quite clear that he is telling us that there isn't grounds in his professional opinion to refuse this application. Now, I've listened to all the arguments and I've listened to the statements we've had so far. And frankly, I've listened to the objectors, but when it comes to the actual report, we have, well, we'll find difficulty, in my view, refusing this, which would stand up to the appeal, which we're always told we must consider. So my view is that I would suggest that we ought to be considering this and to approve it. And if in due course after the discussion comes out, if you need someone, I would, having heard the rest of the people speak, I would propose that, Chairman.
Councillor Stanton.
Thank you, Chair. I actually went over to Compton Dundon on Saturday to see this because I was slightly mystified as to why a single dwelling was coming before the committee. Quite unusual for us to be considering a single dwelling. And curiously, I suspect that if this were a proposal for 10 or 20 houses along that road, it'd be a very different kind of debate. Just to be clear, I mean, I think you'd hear this committee more likely to approve several houses than one. So the residents might want to think about whether they're better off with one or seven. I know a bit about flooding because I'm on both the IDBs and the National Association of Drainage Authorities, and I'm chair of the Somerset Regional Authority. It is in flood zone 1. Those flood zones, people may not be aware, but the Environment Agency redefined the flood zones about 18 months ago, 2 years ago. So if you'd seen that map before 2 years ago, it would have been a bit different. It's not possible to access the old maps, so I can't check. I've looked. But if you look at the contour line, it's 5 metres above Charndaton, which means that it's 9 metres below high tide level on the Bristol Channel. But it's a long way, frankly, from the nearest tidal river, which is the River Tarrant. So I don't think on balance that's a consideration. The landscape is a big consideration. And if I lived in one of those houses where the objectors, some of the objectors live, on the upper side of the road looking across that lovely moor, yeah, I wouldn't want the house built opposite either. And as I said earlier, I'm slightly mystified as to why the applicant is happy to live in that community, but that's a matter for him and his family. I think it's a difficult one. I think on balance, for the reasons that Martin has just stated, I think we probably have to approve this one.
Okay, anyone? Yeah, Councillor Ashton.
Yeah, I fall with Councillor Curley here. I think the road is a natural delineation of, and I think this is basically putting house in the field. If it was 20 houses, we'd be insisting on a footpath down into the centre of the village and other bits and pieces. So scale does come in other considerations as well. So I don't think it's an appropriate place to put, because of the landscape, to put a house. I would be fairly attracted to it. There you go.
Councillor Patrick.
Thank you very much, Chair. I take it, I quite agree with Councillors Whale and Stanton. Along with the chair, I called this one into committee. I think the landscape is very important here. Having listened to all the speakers and having read the report now, and listened to some of the debates, which is still ongoing, I think. I would agree with Councillor Stanton on where I think actually on balance, this is quite a nice, well-designed application. I would be willing to support this in the vote. But we can hold that right until the debate is concluded. But that's where I'm going.
Councillor Page.
Thank you, Chair. In the debate, it's about judgments, about interpretation of various policies, and for what it's worth, I do feel this is in contradiction of our policy SC1 on sustainable development, on policy SS1 on settlement strategy, and on policy SS2 on development in rural settlements, particularly to do with the rural character of Compton Dundon. So I just raise those as areas where, in my interpretation, this application is not fit for purpose.
I just wanted to check with planning, so do those policies apply?
They are housing policies, they are obviously, given the lack of 5-year housing has applied, but the proposal does, SS2 does generally accord with the NPPF, which says housing should be provided in sustainable communities, which our SS2 policy says where you're providing housing, there should be at least 2 services. In that sense, Compton Dundon, we do consider to be an SS2 settlement and is therefore sustainable from our view for growth.
Thank you very much. If there's no one further that wishes to speak, I will go back to Councillor Well as he proposed, was proposing 2 proposals.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I would propose that we accept the application as per the officer's recommendation and the conditions attached. Thank you.
Councillor Stanton.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a proposer and a seconder on the table. Could I please have a show of hands for that proposal? Okay, those against? Any abstention? Okay, so that proposal is passed. Thank you very much, everyone, for what's been a bit of a marathon session. Thank you very much to the officer for the presentations. Before you go, I'm just going to hand over to Troy for the public.
I've done my homework in the intervening council, and I can confirm that all of the appeals that we discussed earlier were all determined prior to the prioritising decisions period last year, and they were all undertaken to delegated authority.
Wow, very good.
There you go. So thank you very much, Troy, for doing that investigation. This is much appreciated. Thank you very much, members. We will all be again next month. Thank you very much.